Craig had one hand on the microphone when he looked straight at me and said, "Some people send money and call that sacrifice." I stayed. The auction pavilion went quiet. I could hear rain tapping the metal roof. Folding chairs scraped behind me as two bidders leaned forward. Monica Avila stood beside the auctioneer with a fixed smile, still holding the brochure that showed Craig near the main barn. My mother, Ruth, was on my left, her fingers closed around my wrist. "Christina," she whispered, "please don't do this here." Craig waited for me to lower my eyes. That was his mistake. I reached into my leather folder. Before we accept the bid, I said, "I need to correct something." That morning had been building for months, maybe longer. To explain why I finally spoke, I have to go back to January when Craig still believed my silence meant he could decide what counted. I was 46 and serving as an Army logistics colonel. I'd been in for 24 years, completed 4 deployments, and spent most of my career making sure people and equipment arrived where they were supposed to arrive. It wasn't glamorous work. It was lists, timing, signatures, and knowing which missing page could stop an entire movement. At Wagner Ridge, none of that impressed Craig. The ranch sat at 842 Red Fox Road, outside Tryon, North Carolina. It had 2 barns, a faded white office, and more fencing than either of us could afford to replace. My father had spent most of his adult life trying to make it profitable. After he was gone, Craig and I formed Wagner Ridge Ranch, LLC, and became equal members. Craig managed daily operations. I remained in the Army. That arrangement made sense at first. He knew the animals, the land, and every contractor within 30 miles. I knew cash flow, records, and how quickly a missed payment could become a real problem. By the beginning of that year, the ranch had suffered through several bad seasons. Feed costs had risen. 2 boarding clients had left. A drainage problem near the lower pasture kept getting worse. Every repair seemed to uncover another repair. Craig called me on a Wednesday morning. "You need to come home this weekend." I was standing beside my kitchen counter with coffee in one hand. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." "Then why do I need to come home?" He sighed. "Because we can't keep doing this over the phone." That meant he had already discussed something with our mother. "What does Ruth think?" "Mom thinks you should come." He always called her Mom when he wanted us to sound like one united family. "I'll be there Saturday." Craig ended the call without saying goodbye. I drove to Tryon before sunrise. The trip took long enough for my coffee to go cold. By the time I turned onto Red Fox Road, thin fog sat over the pastures. The brass gate was closed. That was unusual. Family didn't close the gate during the day unless cattle were being moved. I got out and walked to the chain. The old brass key I'd carried for years didn't fit. I tried it twice, wiped it against my coat, then tried again. Craig's truck appeared on the other side. He stopped, lowered his window, and watched me standing there. "You changed the lock," I said. "Had to. Somebody bent the old one." "When were you going to tell me?" "I'm telling you now." He held up a newer brass key. "Give me one. I've only got this copy." "You changed the lock and made one key? I'll get another cut." He stepped out and opened the gate. His jacket smelled like hay and diesel. When I held out my hand, he dropped the key into his pocket. I said, "I'll get another one." "Today? Christina, can we deal with the actual problem?" I looked at the new padlock. Then I looked at him. "Fine. Open it." He drove through first. I followed him to the ranch office. Our mother was already inside. Ruth was 74, but she still kept paper clips sorted by size in a divided tray. She had been the ranch bookkeeper for years. Even after an outside firm took over, she came in twice a week and checked the mail. She stood when I entered. "You made good time." Craig changed the gate lock. Her eyes moved toward him. "The old one was damaged," he said. "I asked for a key. I told her I'd make one." Ruth touched my sleeve. "Let's sit down first." 3 chairs had been arranged around the desk. That told me this wasn't a conversation. It was a meeting they'd held once already. Craig opened a folder and pushed several pages toward me. "We need to sell." I sat down, but didn't touch the papers. "The whole ranch? What else would I mean?" "You could mean part of the lower acreage. We already looked at that." Who's we? He leaned back. Mom and me. Ruth folded her hands. We didn't decide anything, she said. We just listened. To whom? A broker, Craig said. Monica Avila. I knew Monica by reputation. She handled horse properties and larger tracts around Tryon. How long have you been talking to her? Not long, Ruth answered more honestly. Since before Christmas. I looked at Craig. You waited over a month to call me. We needed to know if selling was even realistic. I own half the company, and I run all of it. There it was. Not quite the full argument, but close. Ruth picked up the first page and turned it toward me. Monica had prepared a rough market estimate, a list of recommended repairs, and a possible auction schedule. She thinks an auction could attract serious buyers, Ruth said. When? Late spring, Craig answered. Maybe early summer, I read the first page. Monica's numbers were estimates, not promises. The ranch still carried debt. There would be commissions, closing costs, and repairs before any sale. What happens if the bids come in low? We set a reserve. What repairs does she expect first? Craig tapped the second page. I read the list slowly. Pavilion roof, main barn siding, gravel on the access lane, cleanup around the equipment shed, new paint in the office. You didn't include the lower pasture drainage. No buyer is going to care about mud in January. A buyer who walks the property will. Well, maybe you can explain drainage to them. You're good at explaining things from far away. Ruth gave him a warning look. Craig, what? She asked. I closed the folder. If we're selling, I want current debt figures, vendor balances, and the LLC ledger. His jaw shifted. The bookkeeper has the ledger. I know who has it. I want a current copy. For what? So I know what we're selling and what gets paid. You think I don't know? I think I've been locked outside my own gate. Ruth pressed her lips together. Craig stood and walked to the window. This is exactly why I didn't call sooner. Every conversation becomes an inspection. You invited me to a business meeting. This is our home. It's also an LLC. He turned back. Only you could make the family ranch sound like a warehouse. I didn't answer. He knew that would land because I'd missed holidays. I'd taken calls from airport terminals. I'd signed ranch papers between Army briefings. Craig could point to every morning he had fed horses while I was somewhere else. What he never pointed to was what I did from somewhere else. Ruth opened the lower desk drawer. The original agreement is still here, she said softly. Craig looked at her. Why are we getting that out? We aren't. She rested her hand on the drawer. I'm saying nothing has been changed. The executed operating agreement was kept in the office safe behind that drawer. We'd signed it years earlier when we formed the company. It covered voting rights, management duties, distributions, and money either member put into the ranch. Craig knew what was in it. So did I. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about using it against him. I was thinking about making sure the sale followed the agreement we had both signed. Any sale has to be approved by both members, I said. I know, and the books need to be current. They are. Then sending the ledger shouldn't be difficult. Craig stared at me for a few seconds. I'll ask for it. Copy me on the request. He gave a small laugh. There she is. Who? Colonel Wagner. Ruth looked down at her hands. Craig continued. Do you ever come in as my sister? I came because my brother called me. No, you came to check whether I'd done my job. I came through a gate where my key no longer worked. That lock cost $27. Stop making it symbolic. I'm asking for access. You have access. You're standing here because you let me in. Neither of us spoke. Outside, something metal struck the side of the equipment shed. The wind had picked up. Ruth rose and walked to the coffee maker, though no one had asked for coffee. We're all tired, she said. That's what this is. Craig looked at her. I'm more than tired. His voice had changed. The sharpness was gone. He sat down again and rubbed both hands over his face. I can't keep covering 3 jobs, he said. I'm up before 5. I'm fixing fence in the dark. Every time the phone rings, somebody wants money. I'm done. That was the first honest sentence he'd said all morning. I lowered my voice. Then let's sell it properly. He nodded once. For a minute, we were on the same side. We reviewed Monica's proposed schedule. Craig wanted the shortest possible preparation period. I wanted enough time to clear the books and inspect the property information given to bidders. Ruth wanted peace. Could we agree not to argue in front of Monica, she asked. I can, I said. Craig looked at me. So can I. The way he said it made it sound like restraint was something only he had been practicing. Before I left, I went to the safe. It was an old gray box built into the wall behind a cabinet. Ruth moved the cabinet key from her desk drawer and handed it to me. Craig watched from the doorway. What are you doing? Checking the agreement. You just said we all know what it says. I want to confirm the sale provisions. He crossed his arms. You think I changed it? No. Then why check? Because we're discussing the largest transaction this company has ever made. Ruth opened the safe. The operating agreement sat inside a brown expanding folder with tax returns and old insurance policies. I removed it and checked the signature page. My signature was there. Craig's was under mine. I turned through the sections until I found the pages on sale proceeds and member loans. I didn't read them aloud. I already knew the language. If either member loaned money to the ranch and the loan was recorded in the company ledger, that member was repaid before the remaining proceeds were divided. The rule had seemed ordinary when we signed it. Craig stepped closer. Satisfied? The agreement is here. Great. Can we put it back now? I looked at Ruth. I want a copy. Craig's shoulders rose. Of course you do. Ruth carried the agreement to the old copier. The machine groaned through every page. I stood beside it and counted the sheets as they came out. Craig picked up his truck keys. I have work. Send me Monica's contact information, I said. She'll contact you. Send it anyway. He walked outside. A few seconds later, his truck started. Gravel snapped under his tires as he drove toward the main barn. Ruth finished copying the agreement and squared the pages against the desk. Don't push him too hard, she said. I asked for records and a gate key. He feels judged by you. I haven't judged him. You don't have to say much. You get quiet. I slid the copied agreement into my bag. What do you want me to do? Remember that he stayed. I looked at her. I remember. He gave his life to this place. And I didn't? That's not what I said. It was close enough that neither of us tried to fix it. I kissed her cheek and left. At the gate, I had to get out and wait for Craig. He must have seen my car from the barn. He walked down slowly with the brass key in his hand. He opened the padlock without looking at me. When will I get my copy? I asked. I said I'd handle it. That wasn't my question. He pulled the chain through the gate. Next week. I held out my hand again. He looked at it, then at me. I need this one. You're inside the property all day. I need to get through the gate without calling you. It's one weekend. It became a problem the minute you changed access without telling me. He shook his head. You always need to win something. No, I need a key. For a moment, I thought he would refuse just to prove he could. Then he took the brass key off its ring and dropped it into my palm. I'll get another made. Thank you. He pushed the gate open. I drove through, parked on the shoulder, and got out to lock it behind me. Craig was already walking away. I closed the padlock and tested it once. The new key worked. That was a small thing, but it gave me an answer. Craig would give me access when I made him answer clearly. He just wouldn't offer it. Before driving home, I called the outside bookkeeper's office. A woman named Denise answered. I'm requesting the current LLC ledger, I said. Please send it to both members. There was a pause while she typed. I can do that. I'll need Craig's approval. I'm an equal member. Yes, ma'am, I see that. Craig has been the operating contact. I'm making a written member request. What email address should I use? She gave it to me. I sent the request from my phone while sitting beside the road. Then I copied Craig and Ruth. 2 minutes later, Craig called. What are you doing? Requesting the ledger. I told you I'd ask. I saved you the trouble. You're making it look like I've hidden something. I asked them to send the same record to both of us. He breathed into the phone. "Monica's meeting us Friday," he said. "Try not to turn that into a court hearing. Send me the time." He hung up. I set the brass gate key in the cup holder. Beside it sat the copied operating agreement. Then an email arrived from Monica Avila. The subject line read, "Preliminary Seller Profile." I opened the attachment. At the top was a photograph of Craig standing alone in front of our barn. Underneath it, one sentence described him as the man who had kept Wagner Ridge alive when the rest of the family moved on. I read it twice. Then I saved the file. I didn't call Monica that evening. I read the rest of the profile first. Most of it was ordinary sales language: rolling pastures, established barns, easy access to town. At the bottom, there was a blank section for ownership history. The photograph bothered me more than the sentence. I knew exactly when it had been taken. Craig wore the brown work jacket Ruth gave him for Christmas. The barn behind him had fresh paint around the doors. That meant Monica had visited during the weeks before he called me. He hadn't just asked for an opinion. He had started preparing the ranch for sale. On Friday, I arrived at Monica's office 10 minutes early. It sat in a brick building near downtown Tryon, between an insurance agency and a store selling riding boots. Craig's truck was already outside. Inside, Monica was arranging brochures on a conference table. She had thick, dark hair pulled behind her neck and reading glasses hanging from a cord. "Christina," she said, "it's good to finally meet you. Finally." I shook her hand. "You too." Craig sat near the window with coffee. Ruth was beside him. Monica offered me a chair. I sent the seller profile so everyone could see the direction. I saw it. "Very preliminary," Craig said. I set my bag on the floor. "Who wrote the family section?" Monica looked between us. Craig gave me the background. I shaped it. Ruth adjusted the cuff of her sweater. Monica opened her notebook. "If anything's inaccurate, this is the time to fix it." Craig took a drink of coffee. "It says the rest of the family moved on," I said. "I didn't move on from the ranch." "It means physically," he said. "Then it should say physically." Monica wrote something down. Craig leaned toward her. "We don't need to get stuck on one sentence." "I agree," I said. "It's easy to correct." Ruth glanced at me, then looked away. Monica spoke carefully. "I can revise it, thank you." Craig put his cup down harder than necessary. Monica moved to the property schedule. She explained that buyers would need time for inspections. The auction pavilion needed electrical work. The access lane had to be improved before heavy traffic arrived. "Craig already has estimates," she said. He slid a packet toward me. I read the first page. The gravel estimate covered the lane from the county road to the pavilion, but not the turn near the lower field. "Delivery trucks will cut that corner," I said. Craig shook his head. "They've managed before, with regular loads, not auction traffic." Monica looked at the site map. "How soft does it get?" "Soft enough to hold water after 2 days of rain." Craig leaned back. "She hasn't seen it lately. I drove it this morning." His face changed. I had arrived at the ranch before coming to town. The brass key had opened the gate. I'd walked the lower lane in boots and taken photographs of standing water near the turn. I passed my phone to Monica. She studied the pictures. "We should add stone there." Craig looked at me. "You went out without telling me?" "I used my key. You could have called. You were meeting me here." Monica handed back my phone. "I'll ask for a revised estimate. That was my first small win." It shouldn't have felt important, but it did. I had identified a practical problem, and someone had listened without treating it as criticism. The meeting continued for another hour. Every time Monica asked about the ranch, Craig answered first. "How many stalls are currently usable?" 22. 20, I said. He frowned. "What?" 2 in the east barn have damaged doors. They're being repaired. Then they'll be usable after they're repaired. Monica changed the number. She asked about the office roof. "Replaced about 12 years ago," Craig said. 14, Ruth said quietly. Craig looked at her. She gave a small shrug. "Your father was still alive. It was the spring after the well pump." Monica wrote 14. That was how the whole meeting went. Craig carried the story. Ruth corrected dates when she couldn't help herself. I checked what could be checked. When Monica asked whether either owner wanted a personal statement in the final brochure, Craig said, "I think buyers care about the property." He had already given her a personal statement about himself. I waited for Ruth to say something. She didn't. Monica turned toward me. "Would you like to provide one?" I could have told her about the years I'd spent calling the ranch from other countries. I could have told her about checking bank balances at odd hours because of the time difference. I could have named the repairs I'd paid for and the months when the ranch came before my own plans. Instead, I said, "Keep the ownership section factual." Craig's shoulders relaxed. That was when I saw my own part in it. I wanted them to notice without making me ask. I wanted Craig to say I belonged there. I wanted Ruth to correct him before I had to correct him myself. For years, I had treated asking for recognition as something undignified. Then I'd resented them for accepting the silence I offered. Monica closed her notebook. "I'll have revised materials ready next week." "Send them to all three of us," I said. Craig rubbed his thumb along the edge of his cup. Obviously. Afterward, Ruth asked me to have lunch with her. Craig said he had to meet a fencing contractor. We walked to a diner around the corner. Ruth chose a booth near the back. She ordered vegetable soup. I ordered a turkey sandwich and didn't touch it for several minutes. She broke a cracker over her bowl. "You embarrassed him." I corrected 2 numbers. "You know that's not what I mean. The family section was wrong. It was badly worded. It was based on what he told Monica." Ruth stirred her soup. "Craig talks big when he feels overlooked." "Who overlooks him? People see the ranch. They don't see how much work it takes. I see it." "Do you?" Her voice was quiet. That made it sharper. "I have never denied his work." "No, but you come in with your questions and your folders. He asked me to approve a sale. He asked his sister to help. He had already hired a broker. Not hired. Talked to. He gave her a photograph and a personal history." Ruth placed her spoon beside the bowl. "Why does that bother you so much?" I looked through the window. A delivery driver was carrying boxes into the boot store. "Because it makes me sound like I left. You did leave. I joined the army. I know. I kept coming back. On leave. On weekends. Between assignments. The sandwich sat untouched in front of me. That still counts." "I didn't say it didn't. You didn't say it did." Ruth pulled the paper wrapper from another cracker. "You've always been the one who didn't need anything. That was convenient. For all of us," she said. I looked at her. She hadn't meant it cruelly. That made it harder to dismiss. When our father got sick, Craig handled appointments. Ruth handled medication. I called every night and came when I could. If they needed money, I sent it. If they needed a form, I found it. I became useful from a distance because that was the role available to me. Then I kept the role after the emergency ended. Ruth took a sip of water. "Your brother needs this sale to feel like his work meant something. What do I need?" She blinked. It was the first time I had asked her that directly. "I don't know," she said. Neither did I. Not in words I could say at that table. I wanted to walk into the ranch office without proving I had a reason to be there. I wanted Craig to tell people he had a sister before he told them he had an investor. I wanted my mother to stop asking me to be the easier person because I was better at it. Instead, I picked up my sandwich. "I need the sale to be accurate." Ruth nodded, but I could tell she thought I had avoided the question. Maybe I had. At work on Monday, I spent most of the morning reviewing a movement plan for vehicles scheduled to cross 3 installations. A captain named Ellis brought me a revised worksheet. Transportation says it's clean now. I ran my finger down the columns. One vehicle appeared twice under different identification formats. This one's duplicated. Ellis leaned closer. He checked the second line and let out a breath. That would have thrown off the carrier count. "Ask them to confirm the source entry. Don't just delete one." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." I handed it back. That exchange took less than a minute. No argument. No one accused me of inspecting them. A wrong entry was a wrong entry, and correcting it protected everyone involved. My personal phone rang after lunch. It was the outside bookkeeper. "Colonel Wagner, this is Denise. I received your email. Thank you for calling. I can send the ledger, but I need to update your account access first. What's wrong with it? The email we have for you is old." She read an address I hadn't used since a previous assignment. "When was it last changed?" "It hasn't been changed since the account was created. Have reports been going there?" "Quarterly notices, yes." Craig receives the full operating packet. "Why doesn't mine?" There was a short pause. The original contact authorization lists him for monthly operations and you for annual tax records. I remembered signing that authorization. Craig had called while I was preparing for an exercise. He said the bookkeeping firm needed one person for routine questions. I told him to list himself because he was at the ranch. At the time, it had been practical. "Can both members receive the full packet?" "Yes." "I'll send a new authorization form." "Does Craig have to approve it?" "No. Each member can update their own delivery settings." That answer mattered. "I'd like access to the secure archive, too. I can activate it today." An email arrived while we were still speaking. I opened the link, created a password, and saw years of financial folders arranged by date. The records had not been hidden from me. They had been sitting behind an account I had never bothered to activate. Denise stayed on the phone. "Do you see the current ledger folder?" "I do. There's also a member transaction folder. It contains the supporting entries for capital contributions and loans." I clicked it. The older files appeared first. Then I saw the records from the year of my 4th deployment. I knew those entries existed. I had received confirmations when each transfer was posted. Still, seeing them in the company archive was different. My name appeared beside each one. The descriptions were plain: member loan, debt payment, operating reserve, emergency vendor balance. No speech, no photograph, just the record. "Can you download copies?" Denise asked. "Yes." "Good. I'll send the current ledger before close of business. Thank you." When the call ended, I sat with my hand on the mouse. Craig had been allowed to become the voice of the ranch because I had made him the operating contact. Ruth had been allowed to call me independent because I rarely told her when I needed anything. Monica had repeated what she was given because I hadn't been in the room when the story started. None of that excused the sentence beneath Craig's photograph. It did explain how easily it had been written. That evening, Monica sent a calendar invitation for the first full property walk. The invitation listed Craig as lead seller contact. My name appeared beneath his under additional attendees. I declined it. Then I sent a replacement invitation with both owners listed in the title. Craig responded within a minute. "Seriously?" I typed, "Yes." He didn't answer again. The next morning, an envelope from the locksmith was waiting in my mailbox. Inside was a new brass key and a receipt marked paid by Craig. There was no note. I added the key to my ring and placed the first one in my service records case. Then I opened the secure archive and began reading what I had spent years trusting other people to remember. The first file I opened contained the ranch's monthly operating reports. Most of the entries were familiar: feed, insurance, equipment repairs, property taxes. The numbers became worse during wet seasons and steadied during boarding months. Then I reached the reports from my 4th deployment. The bookkeeper had attached a short note to each emergency transfer. The money came from me, entered the ranch account, and went out within days. One payment stopped the lender from declaring a default. Another covered overdue vendors. The rest kept the ranch operating while Craig negotiated smaller monthly payments. Nothing in the records called the transfers gifts. I downloaded the reports and saved them by date. That afternoon, Craig called about the property walk. "Monica wants to start at 8 instead of 8:30. I can be there at 8. She and I could do the barns first. You don't need to drive down that early. I'll be there at 8. He went quiet. "Fine." I arrived at 7:45. Craig's truck was parked outside the office. Monica's car was beside it. The office light was on. I unlocked the gate and drove in. By the time I entered the office, Monica had a site map spread across Ruth's old bookkeeping desk. Craig was pointing to the main barn. "I thought we changed the time to 8, I said. Monica checked her watch. "We did." Craig folded the map. We were just getting organized. At 7:45. I took off my coat and laid my folder beside the map. Then I'm right on time. Ruth came through the back door carrying a cardboard tray of coffee. I didn't know you were here already. I could say the same thing. She looked at Craig, but he reached for a cup. Monica handed me a printed checklist. We'll start at the pavilion, then walk the barns and lower acreage. The checklist described Craig as operations representative. The line beside my name said ownership approval. I circled both descriptions with my pen. Monica noticed. Is there an issue? We're both owners. Craig manages operations. That's what it means. Then it should say that. Craig blew across his coffee. Are we going to edit every page before we walk? If every page needs it. Ruth handed me the last cup. It's black. She remembered how I took coffee. That small thing softened me when I didn't want to be softened. We started at the pavilion. It was an open-sided structure near the upper pasture. The roof covered a concrete floor and enough space for folding chairs, tables, and portable auction equipment. One electrical outlet had a strip of black tape across it. Monica pointed to it. The electrician says that line has to be replaced. He's coming Tuesday, Craig said. Who's the electrician? I asked. Craig named him. Is the work in the repair budget? It will be. That means no. He stopped walking. It means I got the estimate yesterday. Monica opened her clipboard. Send it to me when you have it in writing. Craig looked at her, then at me. I will. We walked toward the main barn. Craig explained how he wanted to stage equipment along the west side. Monica asked where bidders would park if the upper field was wet. The lower lane gives them another route, he said. That turn won't hold vehicles after rain, I said. We're adding stone to the straight section. Craig exhaled through his nose. We covered this. We covered adding stone to the turn. I haven't seen a revised estimate. Monica raised one hand. I requested it. It hasn't come back yet. We kept walking. Inside the barn, Craig showed her the repaired stall doors. Fresh hardware had been installed, but one latch didn't close without lifting the door. He pulled it twice. It settles, he said. I put my coffee on a ledge and checked the upper hinge. The screws are pulling. They're new. The wood around them isn't. Craig stared at the hinge. Monica did too. I took a photograph. Why don't you inspect the other door? I asked. Craig's mouth tightened, but he crossed the aisle. That door had the same problem. Monica wrote it down. Both need reinforcement before photographs. Craig pushed his cap back. I'll call the carpenter. No one argued after that. For the next hour, we worked through the checklist. Craig knew the ranch better than anyone. He knew which water line froze first and which stall wall had been patched twice. I knew the records. When Monica asked when something had been replaced, I checked the insurance schedule or maintenance file. At the equipment shed, we found 3 fuel cans beside a stack of old boards. Monica pointed at them. Those can't be here during bidder tours. I'll move them, Craig said. Where's the approved storage cabinet? I asked. He pointed toward the rear wall. The cabinet was locked, but the metal around the bottom had rusted through. Craig crouched and pressed it with one finger. A piece fell inward. He looked up at me. I didn't know that. I know. It was the first time all morning he admitted not knowing something without making it my fault. We added a replacement cabinet to the list. At the lower lane, Monica's shoes sank into the soft edge near the turn. She stepped back and wiped mud against a patch of grass. You were right about this, she said. Craig looked toward the field. We'll fix it. Monica took more photographs. It needs to happen before the first bidder preview. When is that? I asked. 3 weeks. Craig answered at the same time. Plenty of time. Monica checked her calendar. The brochure has to go to print before that. I haven't approved a brochure, I said. The final isn't ready. Has anything been distributed? She hesitated. Only the preliminary profile. To whom? A private group of possible bidders and local agents. It's standard. We test interest before committing to a full campaign. I looked at Craig. He picked at dried mud on his boot. When did that go out? Tuesday. Monica said, the day before Craig called me. Was my approval required? For a preliminary profile, no. Craig presented himself as the operating contact and said both owners were considering a sale. That part was true, he said. I wasn't considering a sale on Tuesday. I didn't know about it. Ruth stood a few feet away. She pulled her coat closed even though the wind had eased. Monica's expression changed. I understood that the family had discussed it. The family had, Craig said. She just hadn't been at the table yet. I kept my eyes on him. That isn't the same thing. We weren't accepting an offer. You were telling buyers why the ranch was for sale. Trying to see if anyone cared isn't a crime. I didn't say it was. Monica held her clipboard against her chest. I can send Christina the distribution materials. Yes, I said. Send everything that has gone out. Craig turned toward the barns. This is getting ridiculous. No, I said. It's becoming clear. He walked ahead of us. Monica stayed beside me. I don't want to be in the middle of a family disagreement. You shouldn't be. You should have accurate instructions from both sellers. I agree. Then send me the seller intake form too. She looked surprised. Craig completed that. I assumed he did. I can send it. Please do. That was my deliberate move. I wanted to see what Craig had told her before anyone knew I was looking closely. We finished the walk shortly before noon. Monica left with a repair list twice as long as the one she'd brought. Craig followed her car to the gate, then came back to the office. Ruth was washing coffee cups in the small sink. I sat at the desk and checked my email. Craig stopped across from me. You made me look incompetent. I found 2 weak doors, a rusted cabinet, and a bad turn. I know what you found. Then fix them. You think a checklist makes you part of this place? Ruth turned off the water. Craig, stop. He pointed toward my folder. She flies in with paper and suddenly she's the responsible one. I drove here from my house. You know what I mean. Yes, I do. He lowered his voice. You get to leave when this meeting ends. I stay with every problem you write down. That's your job. That's my life. And that's why you're paid as operations manager. His face went still. Money was the one thing we almost never mentioned directly. His management pay was modest. Some months he delayed taking it. I knew that. The ledger showed it. But the ledger also showed everything else. Ruth dried her hands. You both contributed differently. Craig laughed once. That's what people say when one person did the work. I stood and put on my coat. I'm not asking Monica to diminish your work. Then stop correcting me in front of her. Stop giving her things I have to correct. I left before Ruth could ask me to make peace. Monica sent the files at 3:17 that afternoon. There were 2 email drafts, the preliminary profile, a list of property facts, and the seller intake form. Craig had completed the form at Monica's office. His handwriting filled the blank spaces. Under reason for sale, he had written that the ranch could no longer support the workload required to continue. That was fair. Under owner participation, he had written that he was the only family member engaged in ranch operations. That was also fair if operations meant daily work. The next line asked whether any non-operating owner had made substantial contributions that should be mentioned in marketing materials. Craig had checked no. I stared at the box. The question didn't say labor. It didn't say who lived nearby. It asked about contributions. He knew about my transfers. He had called me during that deployment and told me exactly what the ranch needed. He had confirmed when the lender received the money. I opened the archive ledger beside the intake form. The dates matched the payment confirmations in my locked service records case. The amounts matched the member loan entries. The money had gone where Craig told me it had gone. There was no accounting inconsistency. The inconsistency was Craig. Monica had included her notes from the intake meeting. One sentence had been typed beside the family history section. Craig says sister kept separate career and left ranch responsibility to him. I read it once, then closed the file. A few minutes later, Ruth called. Your brother says you're trying to take over the auction. I asked for the materials sent to buyers. He says you treated him like an employee. He is the operations manager. He's also your brother. I'm also his sister. That didn't stop him from telling Monica I made no substantial contribution. Ruth went silent. He said that? He checked the box. Maybe he misunderstood the question. He filled out the next section with a paragraph. What next section? Family history. I heard her chair move against the kitchen floor. What did he write? He said I left ranch responsibility to him. Well, the daily responsibility. That isn't what he wrote. She lowered her voice. Christina, what are you going to do? I looked at the deadline on Monica's email. Final brochure changes were due by Monday afternoon. I'm going to give him the chance to correct it. Privately? Yes. Ruth let out a breath. Good. She sounded relieved, as if privacy meant the problem would stay small. After we hung up, I sent Craig the intake form with the checked box highlighted. I wrote one sentence, "Please correct this before Monday." His reply arrived 10 minutes later. "We need to talk in person." I looked at the words for a long time. Then I opened my calendar and cleared Saturday morning. Saturday morning, Craig arrived at Ruth's house carrying a yellow legal pad. She had made coffee and set out 3 clean cups. She did that whenever she expected a difficult conversation. The cups gave everyone something to hold. Craig sat across from me at the kitchen table. "You want the form corrected," he said. "Yes, I'm not changing it." Ruth placed the coffee pot between us. "Craig, hear her out. I've heard her." I opened the seller intake form and turned it toward him. "You checked no besides substantial contributions. Because it's a marketing form. That doesn't change the question. It asks who contributed to the ranch story. No, it asks if a non-operating owner made a substantial contribution. You weren't involved in operations. I didn't claim I was. Then what do you want me to write?" "The truth." He pushed the form back. "Buyers don't care who transferred money 6 years ago." That wasn't the question either. Ruth sat beside him. Could the box just be left blank? Craig looked at her. "Why?" "To avoid an argument." He gave a tired laugh. "We're already having one." I kept my voice level. "Change the answer to yes. Monica can decide whether the details belong in the brochure." "No." "Why not?" "Because once she starts asking questions, this entire sale becomes about Christina's money." I watched him. There it was. He didn't think the answer was inaccurate. He thought the truth would take attention away from him. "I'm not asking for an amount in the brochure. You'll get there. I asked for one checked box. You brought the ledger into it. You told me there was no contribution. I told Monica there was no contribution she needed to market. That isn't what you wrote." Craig pressed both hands against the table. "I stayed here for 6 years after that money came in. Do you understand that? 6 years of feed deliveries, broken pipes, sick horses, insurance calls, and people paying late. A transfer didn't do those things. No one said it did. You keep holding it up like it did. I haven't held it up at all. That's the problem." Ruth reached for her coffee but didn't drink. "Maybe we should take the family paragraph out completely," she said. Craig turned to her. "So now I'm erased?" "No one said that. I'm the one who'll be showing buyers around. I'm the one who knows the property. But we have to remove my history because Christina saw a sentence she didn't like. I asked you to correct a form," I said. "You want the brochure to give you credit. I want the records to stop at the point where the facts stop." He pulled the legal pad closer. "Fine. Let's talk about records." He had written several figures across the top. They were based on Monica's rough estimate, projected closing costs, and the ranch debt. One line near the bottom divided the expected remainder in half. There was no line for repayment of my member loan. I tapped the page. "This is incomplete. It's an estimate. You left out the member loan." Craig leaned back. "I didn't leave it out. I assumed you'd waive it." Ruth looked at him, then at me. "Waive it?" she asked. Craig's eyes stayed on mine. "We're selling everything. We pay the bank. We pay the auction costs. Then Christina and I divide what's left equally. That isn't what the agreement says. I know what the agreement says. Then why would you assume I'd waive it? Because we're equal owners. We're equal owners after company debts are paid. It's not a company debt. It's money you sent to keep your own ranch. It was recorded as a member loan. On paper. Yes, that's where loans are recorded. His chair moved back an inch. You always do that. Do what? Talk like anyone who disagrees with you is stupid. I'm explaining the document you signed. I signed it before any of this happened. The agreement came first. The transfers were made under it. Ruth looked at the yellow pad. How much are we talking about? Craig answered before I could. $186,000. She stopped moving. The kitchen clock clicked behind me. Ruth had kept the ranch books when we signed the operating agreement. She knew the loan provision. She'd also known I sent money during the emergency. I wasn't sure she had ever put the full amount together. She looked at me. All from you? Yes. During that deployment? Yes. Craig rubbed his forehead. This is what I mean. Now it sounds like I did nothing. No, I said. It sounds like both things happened. He pointed toward the legal pad. If she takes that off the top, she gets $186,000 before we split $1. If the full balance is still owed, you know it is. I know what my records show. The closing records will have to match. Ruth's face tightened. And after that, the rest is split? Equally, I said. She looked at Craig. He stood and walked to the sink. That's not equal. It is exactly equal, I said. The ranch repays its debt. Then the owners divide the remaining proceeds. My labor kept the value from disappearing. Your labor deserves respect. Respect doesn't pay for the years I lost. You received management pay, not every month. The unpaid amounts should be in the ledger if the company owes them. He turned around. So now I need to prove I worked. No. You need to separate work, ownership, and loans. They're only separate to you. They were separate when we formed the LLC. Ruth held up one hand. Please, both of you. Craig returned to the table but didn't sit. He pointed at me. You have your Army retirement ahead of you. You have a salary. You have a house. This sale is what I have. Money stayed scarce in our family even when we pretended it didn't. Craig's truck was old. The ranch house needed windows. I knew he had put off dental work because he didn't want another bill. I also knew where my transfer money came from. I had delayed replacing my own roof. I had stopped contributing extra to retirement for a time. I had sent nearly every available dollar because Craig told me the lender was days from acting. My salary had made the money possible. It hadn't made the money free. I'm not waiving the loan, I said. Ruth looked at me as if she hadn't expected an answer so quickly. Could you think about it? I have. When? Every time I send a transfer. Craig picked up the legal pad. Then you're choosing money over family. No, I'm refusing to pretend money stopped being money when you needed mine. He stared at me. Ruth whispered my name. I looked at her. What would preserve peace? I asked. Me giving up the loan or Craig honoring the agreement? She didn't answer. Craig tucked the pad under his arm. If you take that repayment, don't expect me to smile while you tell everyone we contributed equally. I have never said our contributions were identical. That's what you want people to hear. I want them to hear that you ran the ranch and I financed it when the ranch was in danger. His expression hardened. You financed part of one bad year. I kept documented debt from defaulting. You weren't here. No, I was deployed. He looked away first. That was the boundary. I wasn't going to let him turn my absence into proof that nothing came from me. Ruth walked Craig to the front door. They spoke quietly in the hall. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard her say, "She isn't trying to take it from you." His answer was clear. She already decided what she's taking. The door closed. Ruth came back to the kitchen and sat down. You could give him some of it. After closing, or waive part. Why? Because he needs a start. So do I. You have a career. I also have obligations. I know. I'm just saying his life has been tied to that land, And mine hasn't? Not in the same way. There was the family rule. Craig's needs were physical, so they counted. Mine arrived through email and bank transfers, so they could be adjusted. I gathered my papers. Did you know he expected me to waive it? Ruth rubbed one thumb across the table. He mentioned an equal split. That isn't what I asked. She looked toward the window. He said you wouldn't hold the loan over him. When? Before he contacted Monica. That answered another question. The missing line on his legal pad wasn't a recent mistake. His plan depended on my silence before I even knew there was a plan. Did you agree with him? I said I hoped you two would be fair. To him, to each other. But you didn't call me. I didn't know how serious he was. He had Monica at the ranch. Ruth's eyes filled, but no tears fell. I wanted him to have something to look forward to. I put the intake form in my bag. So you let him believe I'd agree. I thought you might. Because I've always been the one who doesn't need anything. She looked down. Yes? It hurt more when she admitted it. I stood by the table for a moment. I'm not signing away the loan. What if he refuses to sell? Then we keep losing money. That could ruin what's left. I know. She followed me to the porch. Are you going to tell Monica? Not about the loan. Ruth looked relieved again. I'm going to respond to the brochure language. That's all. Privately? Yes. On Monday morning, Monica sent the final brochure draft. The earlier sentence had changed. It no longer said the rest of the family moved on. Instead, it described Craig as the sole family member whose daily sacrifice had kept Wagner Ridge alive through its hardest years. The wording was cleaner. The message was the same. I called Monica. I can approve the property facts, I said. I don't approve the family description. She was quiet for a moment. Craig feels strongly about including it. I know. He says it reflects daily operations. Then say he managed daily operations. He thinks that sounds like a job title. It is his job title. Monica sighed. I need both ownership signatures on the auction agreement by 5. If we miss the print deadline, we lose our reserved auction date. How much would that delay us? At least 6 weeks, possibly longer. 6 more weeks meant feed, payroll, insurance, and another debt payment. The ranch account didn't have room for that. Send the signature page, I said. Does that mean you approve the brochure? It means I authorize the auction. I'm noting my objection to the family description in writing. I can keep that with the file. Do that. The auction agreement arrived a few minutes later. I read every line and signed it. Craig signed 20 minutes after me. By 5, Monica confirmed the date. The brochure went to print with his photograph and his version of the ranch history. My objection stayed in her file. That was the cost of keeping the sale moving. That evening, Craig sent one message. We still need to settle the loan issue before auction day. I placed the phone beside my service records case. Then I unlocked it and took out the transfer confirmations for the first time in 6 years. The papers smelled faintly of metal and old cardboard. I arranged them across my dining table by date. Each confirmation showed the account that sent the money, the ranch account that received it, and my name as the sender. I compared them with the ledger files on my laptop. The dates matched, the amounts matched, the descriptions matched. I added the transfers myself, then checked the total against the member loan balance. $186,000 remained unpaid. Nothing had been reduced, forgiven, or changed into an ownership contribution. I knew that already. Still, I needed more than memory before I made another move. The next morning, Monica called. The printed brochures are ready. All right, we're bringing them to the ranch. I also need updated photographs of the pavilion. When? Thursday morning. I'll be there. She paused. Craig said you might have a work conflict. He didn't ask me. I'm asking now. Thursday is fine. I adjusted my schedule and drove down before daylight. Rain had fallen overnight. When I reached the lower turn, water sat in 2 shallow tracks beside the new gravel. Craig was standing there with a shovel. He watched me park. You came. Monica called me. I told her I could handle photographs. I know. He drove the shovel into the wet edge and lifted a heavy clump of mud. I took my coat off and folded it on the passenger seat. Where's the other shovel? He looked at my boots. In the truck. I got it. We worked without talking for several minutes. The new gravel had been spread, but the water had nowhere to go. It gathered along the inside edge and softened the ground beneath it. Craig pointed toward the ditch. That needs to be opened another 6 feet. Then the water can move under the fence line. It might wash out. Not if we line it. With what? I looked toward the pile of flat stone beside the equipment shed. He followed my eyes. That's for the barn path. Not all of it. He rested both hands on the shovel. You have an answer for everything. No, I have an answer for this. We carried stone down in the bed of his truck. Craig opened the ditch while I placed the flatter pieces along the bottom. Mud covered my gloves and the knees of my work pants. At one point, he reached past me and turned a stone. Flat side up, he said. I see it. You had it backward. I said I see it. He almost smiled. It disappeared before I could be sure. By the time Monica arrived, water was moving away from the turn. She stepped out of her car carrying a box of brochures. That looks better. Craig wiped his hands on a rag. We fixed it. He said we. I noticed. Monica took pictures of the lane, then handed each of us a brochure. The cover showed the ridge at sunset. Craig's photograph appeared inside beside the family history. The sentence I had objected to was printed exactly as approved. My name appeared once on the seller information page. Monica watched me read it. The property section came out well, she said. It did. Craig opened his copy and looked at the photograph. You can actually see the new barn doors. I closed the brochure. When do bidder previews begin? Next Tuesday. How many are scheduled? 4 groups so far. More may come. Craig looked pleased. Monica pulled a second packet from the box. I need both of you to review the seller disclosures before then. Buyers will ask about repairs, drainage, boundaries, and known defects. I took a copy. Craig glanced at the first page. We've sold horses, not a whole property. How detailed does this need to be? Detailed enough that no one is surprised later. I looked toward the lower turn. Then we disclosed the drainage work. Monica nodded. Yes. Craig said nothing. We walked to the pavilion for photographs. A ranch employee was sweeping dirt from the concrete. He stopped when he saw me carrying the brochure. Morning, Colonel. Morning, he pointed at the box. Those the auction books? Brochures. He took one from Monica and opened it. Good picture, Craig. Craig nodded. She knows how to use a camera. The employee turned another page, then looked at me. You helping him get everything sold? I'm one of the sellers. His eyebrows lifted. I knew it was family property. I didn't know you were still an owner. Craig bent to move a folding table. The employee gave me an uncomfortable smile. No offense meant, none taken. He carried the brochure toward the barn. Monica checked her camera settings. She didn't seem to notice what had happened. Craig did. He's been here 8 months, he said. He reads what he's given. Don't start. I didn't. We arranged tables under the pavilion. One leg was shorter than the others, so Craig slid a thin piece of wood under it. I lined the chairs along the rear wall. For 20 minutes, we worked like we used to work before every conversation became a test. He lifted. I measured. He told me where supplies were kept. I returned them when we finished. Then he saw the service records case inside my open car. He stopped beside the passenger door. Why did you bring that? I closed the door. I need to compare original records with the agreement. Here? The original agreement is here. His face tightened. You're really doing this. I told you I wasn't waiving the loan. You don't need military records to say no. I need the records for closing. We don't even have a buyer. We have an auction in a few weeks and closing 10 business days after that, assuming we accept a bid. Yes. He looked toward Monica. She was taking pictures near the fence and couldn't hear us. You want her to see those papers? No. Then keep them out of sight. I opened the rear door and placed the case on the floor behind the driver's seat. Better? That's not the point. It seems to be exactly the point. He lowered his voice. You bring those out and everyone sees a colonel with a stack of records. What am I supposed to bring? My old gloves? Bring the truth about your work. You keep saying that like you believe it. I do believe it. Then waive the loan. No. He walked away. The direct connection he made between respect and surrendering money told me this wasn't going to end with one private conversation. After Monica left, I carried the case into the office. Ruth had come to help review the disclosures. She was at the desk with her glasses low on her nose. "What's that?" she asked. "My transfer confirmations." She removed her glasses. "You brought them here?" "The agreement is here. The ledger is in the secure archive. I want to check all three together." She looked toward the window. "Craig won't like it. He already saw the case." Ruth closed the disclosure packet. "I wish you two could finish one task without turning back to this. This is part of the sale. Not today, especially today. We're signing statements about company debts and property obligations. The loan isn't a property defect. No, it's a company debt." She leaned back. "I understand the words. Then what are we arguing about? We're arguing about what happens to your brother after the ranch is gone. What happens to me? You go back to your life." I placed the locked case on the desk. "This is my life too." Ruth's mouth tightened. She reached into the drawer and removed the safe key. I didn't say it wasn't. She opened the cabinet, then the safe. The brown folder was exactly where we had left it. I took out the operating agreement and set it beside my case. Ruth watched as I turned to the member loan section. "You knew that section was there," she said. "Yes." "Why check again? Because knowing isn't the same as presenting." I unlocked the case. The confirmations were clipped together. I placed them in order, opened the ledger on my laptop, and worked down the entries. Ruth stood behind me. The first transfer matched. So did the second. By the third, she sat in the chair beside mine. "I remember this one," she said. I looked at her. The feed supplier had stopped deliveries. Yes, Craig said he found another source. He did. After the overdue balance was paid, her finger hovered above the confirmation. "I didn't know it came through you that morning. He called me the night before." She read my name at the top. "Where were you?" "I was deployed." "I know that." "Where?" I told her. She nodded slowly. "That would have been the middle of the night for you." It was late. She touched the edge of the paper. "Your father used to say you could solve things without making noise." I didn't answer. That was exactly how the problem had grown. I solved things quietly. Craig became the person standing beside the result. The office door opened. Craig came in carrying a box of tools. He stopped when he saw the table. The agreement was open. The confirmations were beside it. The ledger filled my laptop screen. "What is this?" "Verification," I said. "Mom, why did you open the safe?" "She asked for the agreement." "You could have said no." Ruth straightened. "She's an owner. It's her agreement too." That was the first time she had used the correct fact without softening it. Craig set the tools on the floor. "You're building a case against me." "No, I'm preparing the company records." "For what?" "Closing." "We haven't selected a closing attorney." "Then we should. You're weeks ahead. We'll have 10 business days after an accepted bid. That's not much time to discover a problem. There is no problem unless you make one." I turned the laptop toward him. "Do you see any repayment entry?" He didn't look. "I know there isn't." "Do you dispute that these transfers came from me?" "No." "Do you dispute that they were recorded as loans?" His jaw moved. "No." That was useful. He had finally said it plainly with Ruth present. I closed the agreement. Then the records agree. He looked at our mother. "Are you just going to sit there?" Ruth folded her hands. "The records are the records." He picked up his tools again. "Fine, let the records keep the ranch running." He left and shut the door hard enough to shake the glass. Ruth stared at it. "He's scared. So am I. You don't show it. That doesn't make it less true." I called the bookkeeper while the agreement was still open. Denise answered and confirmed that the member loan balance had carried forward each year. No repayment or waiver had been entered. "What will the closing attorney need?" I asked. The executed agreement, the transfer confirmations, and our ledger copy from the secure archive. The attorney will authenticate them and prepare the settlement schedule. Can you send the ledger directly when we name the attorney? Yes. I'll need written authorization from both members or a valid request under the company agreement. Craig would see that request. There was no way to prepare quietly forever. After the call, Ruth locked the original agreement back in the safe. I returned the confirmations to my case. Monica emailed before I left. The first bidder group had moved its visit up by 2 days. She wanted both owners available, and she needed the completed seller disclosures by the following afternoon. I looked through the office window. Craig was standing near the main barn with the printed brochure tucked under his arm. He knew I had matched the records. Now we had to face buyers together, while he still expected me to surrender what those records proved. The seller disclosures took us almost 3 hours. Craig wanted short answers. I wanted answers a buyer could understand without guessing. Ruth sat between us with old repair receipts and insurance records. The drainage section caused the first problem. Craig wrote, "Corrected with new gravel." I crossed out corrected and wrote improved. He took the pen from my hand. We fixed it. We improved the turn. We didn't change the way water moves across the field. The ditch works. After one night of rain. What do you want me to write? The road becomes a river? No. I want the buyer to know the lower lane gets soft during extended rain. That makes it sound unusable. It can become unusable. Ruth opened an old maintenance folder. Your father put stone there 3 times. Craig looked at her. That was before we opened the ditch. He opened it too, she said. It filled back in. I wrote that drainage maintenance had been performed more than once. Craig stood. You're going to scare them off. I'm going to keep them from discovering it after they spend money. They can see the road. Not if the preview happens on a dry day. Ruth placed the old receipts beside the form. She's right about disclosing it. Craig looked from her to me. Fine. Put it in. That was useful. The form would be accurate even if he hated it. The first bidder group arrived 2 mornings later. There were 3 adults and a property consultant. I didn't ask their ages. They came in 2 clean sport utility vehicles and parked near the pavilion. Monica greeted them first. Craig stood beside her in his brown jacket. He had placed brochures on a table with bottled water and pens. I stayed near the edge until Monica introduced us. This is Craig Wagner, the ranch operations manager, and Christina Wagner, co-owner. The woman leading the group shook my hand. You don't live on the property? No. Craig does? In the ranch house, he said. She looked at the brochure. So you're the one who's been running everything. Every day. She smiled at him. That has to be a hard thing to let go. Craig glanced toward the barns. It's not easy. I said nothing. The group started at the pavilion. Craig explained how events had been arranged there. He knew the power capacity, water access, and the fastest path to the barns. At the east barn, the consultant checked the reinforced stall doors. New work? Completed this week, Craig said. I tested the latch. It closed cleanly. The carpenter had repaired both frames properly. At the equipment shed, the new fuel cabinet stood against the rear wall. The old one was gone. Craig noticed me looking. I handled it. I see that. The consultant opened the cabinet and checked the base. This is good. Craig nodded. I meant it when I said his work deserved respect. He had completed every repair on Monica's list before the preview. He looked tired, but the property looked ready. The trouble started at the lower lane. The sun had been out for a full day. The gravel surface looked firm. The consultant crouched near the ditch and pressed one hand against the soil. Does this area hold water? Craig answered first. We improved the drainage. I added, it still gets soft after extended rain. That's in the disclosure. The woman looked at Monica. Can we get a copy today? Yes. Craig kept walking. When we reached the lower pasture, he moved beside me. You didn't need to add that, she asked. I answered. You gave half the answer. His face stayed forward. You enjoy this? No. You look pretty comfortable. I'm comfortable with facts. He stepped away before the buyers turned around. Back at the pavilion, the group asked about the sale process. Monica explained the reserve, deposit, and closing deadline. The woman looked at Craig. "Will you be the person accepting the bid?" "Both members have to accept," I said. Craig smiled without looking at me. "She handles that side." "What side?" the woman asked. "Paper." I waited. She looked at my uniform coat folded over a chair. I wasn't in uniform, but the small army pin on my lapel was visible. "Are you an attorney?" "No, I'm an Army logistics colonel." Her expression changed slightly. "That explains the organized answers. It explains some of them." The consultant gave a short laugh. Craig began stacking unused water bottles. The woman looked between us. "Will both sellers be at the auction?" "Yes," I said. Craig said, "That's the plan." There was nothing openly hostile in his words. The problem was the space he left around them. The group thanked Monica and walked toward their vehicles. Before leaving, the woman told Craig she wanted another look at the upper pasture. "We can arrange that," he said. She nodded to me. "Thank you for being direct about the lane. You're welcome." That was the small payoff. Accuracy hadn't chased her away. She'd asked for more information. After the vehicles disappeared through the gate, Monica gathered the signed visitor forms. That went reasonably well. Craig turned to her. "She made the drainage sound worse than it is." Monica looked at me. I repeated the disclosure. "You could have let me answer." "The buyer asked whether it holds water. I said we improved it. That doesn't answer yes or no." Monica held up both hands. "The disclosure is clear. Let's leave it there." Craig carried the water box to his truck. I helped Monica fold the tablecloth. "Did I create a problem?" I asked. "With the drainage?" "No, with the seller presentation." She took longer to answer. "Buyers notice when owners communicate differently." "Meaning?" "Craig talks from experience. You talk from records. Both are accurate." "They can be. But if you correct each other in front of bidders, people start wondering what else you disagree about." That was fair. "What do you recommend?" "One person leads each subject. Craig handles operations and property history. You handle ownership approval and documents." That division sounded sensible. It also gave him every story and gave me every signature. Who handles company finances? Who normally does? The outside bookkeeper holds the ledger. Craig receives operating packets. I'm an equal member. Monica tucked the visitor forms into her folder. I'd direct financial questions to the closing attorney once one is selected. "When does that happen?" "Before auction day. I usually recommend having someone lined up at least a week before." "Who selects the attorney?" "The sellers." "Both of us?" "Yes." That gave me the next useful fact. Monica closed the box of brochures. "I'm not trying to minimize your role. I know. I can only market what sellers give me. I know that too." Her answer wasn't an apology. It was information. She wasn't going to investigate our history. That wasn't her job. Craig came back from his truck. "Are we finished?" "For today," Monica said. He looked at me. "Good." The first email arrived that evening. The bidder group wanted copies of the drainage receipts, recent utility costs, and the seller disclosure. Monica called it a positive sign. I sent the documents I had. Craig supplied the utility information. Ruth found the older drainage receipts. For one full day, the three of us worked without arguing. Then the group canceled its second visit. Monica called while I was leaving work. "They're not moving forward. Did they say why?" "They're concerned about ongoing drainage maintenance." I closed my car door but didn't start the engine. Was that the only reason? No. What else? They felt there might be disagreement between the sellers about the condition of the property. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. Did they think we were hiding something? They didn't say that. Did they lose confidence? That's my reading. The cost was immediate. A serious bidder had walked away before the auction. Would they have discovered the drainage anyway? Probably. Then the disclosure wasn't the mistake. No, the presentation was. I sat up. Understood. "I have other previews scheduled," Monica said. "But you and Craig need to decide how you'll handle questions." "We will." When I reached Ruth's house, Craig was already there. He had told her the bidder withdrew because I couldn't stop correcting him. Ruth opened the door before I knocked. "Please stay calm. I am calm. That isn't always better." I followed her into the kitchen. Craig stood beside the table. The printed brochure lay in front of him. "You cost us a bidder," he said. "The buyer was concerned about drainage and seller disagreement, which you created. The drainage existed before I got there. The disagreement didn't need to be public. You gave an incomplete answer. I gave a normal answer. Buyers know land gets wet. They asked a direct question. And Colonel Wagner had to make sure everyone heard the worst version." Ruth stepped between us. "Stop using her rank like an insult." Craig looked at her. "I'm describing what she did." "No," Ruth said. "You're angry," she answered. He pulled out a chair and sat. "She doesn't belong on the tours." Ruth looked at me. "Maybe one person should lead." "Monica said the same thing," I replied. Craig spread his hands. "There. So let me do it. I'll let you lead operations questions." "No. Stay away from the previews. I'm an owner. You're making buyers nervous. So are you." His mouth opened, then closed. Ruth sat across from him. "What if Christina attends but lets you answer property questions? That's what was supposed to happen today." "No," I said. "No one told me that." Craig leaned forward. "You don't need written orders for a property tour. I need an agreed plan if I'm expected not to speak." There it is again. I put my bag on the floor. "I won't attend the next preview." Ruth looked surprised. Craig nodded once, as if I had finally accepted something obvious. But I continued, "All factual materials go to both owners. All disclosures remain complete. Any question affecting ownership, debt, or sale approval comes to me, too." Craig's expression changed. "You're using this to control closing. I'm defining responsibilities. You're setting up the loan." "Yes." Ruth covered her eyes for a moment. "Can we get through 1 week without saying that word? The loan won't disappear because we stop saying it." Craig pushed back from the table. "This is what the bidder saw. You care more about being right than selling. I care about selling without lying. No one lied. You told Monica I made no substantial contribution. We are not doing this again." He stood. Ruth looked at me. "Maybe you should let the sale happen first, then work out the money. That would be too late." "Why?" "Because once we accept a bid, closing is due within 10 business days. The debts and distributions have to be scheduled before then." Craig stared at me. "You've been planning this. I've been preparing. For a fight. For closing." He left through the back door. Ruth remained at the table. "You lost a bidder today. We lost a bidder. You know what I mean. Yes. You mean it would be easier if I disappeared until a signature was needed." She looked at the brochure. "I don't want you to disappear. You just don't want anyone to notice when I'm being removed." Her face tightened. "That's cruel. It's also true." I drove home with the service records case on the back seat. Until then, part of me still wanted Craig to correct the brochure. I wanted Ruth to say my role mattered. I wanted the sale to end with everyone agreeing on what we had each done. That was no longer a workable goal. Craig wasn't confused. Ruth wasn't neutral. Monica wasn't responsible for sorting out our family history. Waiting for them to recognize me had already cost us 1 bidder and years of my own silence. The sale still had to succeed, but success could no longer mean being thanked. It had to mean that the property facts were honest. The bid was accepted without delay, and the agreement was followed even if Craig never gave me credit for any of it. I opened Monica's email and read the line about selecting a closing attorney. Then I wrote back, "Please send both owners the closing requirements and your local attorney list." Monica sent the list before 9 the next morning. There were 3 attorneys. I called each office and asked the same questions. Could they prepare for an auction closing? Could they meet a 10 business day deadline? Would they represent the transaction rather than one sibling against the other? The first office couldn't guarantee the schedule. The second wanted a deposit before reviewing anything. Sandra Ford answered the third call herself. "What's the auction date?" she asked. I told her. And both members are selling? Yes. Do both members have equal voting rights? Yes. Any company debt besides the mortgage and ordinary bills? There's a member loan. Is it documented? Yes. Is it disputed? I looked through my office window. 2 soldiers were moving sealed cases onto a cart. One checked every label before the other touched the handle. The other member knows the money was transferred and recorded as a loan. He wants me to waive it. That's different from disputing whether it exists. I agree. Sandra didn't comment on that. If I'm selected as closing attorney, I'll need the executed operating agreement, the current ledger from the bookkeeper, and proof supporting any member debt. I'll also need both sellers to understand that I follow the company documents. I don't negotiate family settlements. That's what I want. What does your brother want? An equal split without repaying the loan first. Then he may not want me. At least he'll know before agreeing. Sandra gave me 2 times when she could speak with both of us. I thanked her and ended the call. I didn't ask whether she thought I was right. That wasn't the job. I sent Craig and Monica a short comparison of the 3 offices. I included availability, requested fees, and closing experience. Sandra was the only one who could commit to the deadline without asking us to move the auction date. Craig called within 5 minutes. You told an attorney about the loan. I asked whether she could handle the company records. You're supposed to be selecting a closing attorney, not hiring one to come after me. She would close the sale for the LLC. You already gave her your version. I told her there was a documented member loan and that you wanted a waiver. So your version. Which part is inaccurate? He didn't answer. I continued. She offered 2 times for a joint call. Pick one. I want to call the others. Their information is in the email. I don't need your permission. No, you need their availability. He hung up. An hour later, he replied to the email. Sandra can do Thursday at 4. I accepted the time. On Thursday, I joined the call from my office. Craig and Ruth sat together in the ranch office. I could hear the old copier running behind them. Sandra began with the schedule. If a bid is accepted at auction, closing is due within 10 business days. That means I need the ownership and debt records before the auction, not after. Craig spoke first. The mortgage payoff is straightforward. I'll order that directly from the lender, Sandra said. What other company obligations should I expect? Normal vendors. And the member loan? He looked at the screen. Christina considers it a loan. I said nothing. Sandra waited. Craig continued. The ledger calls it that. Do you dispute the transfers occurred? No. Do you dispute the ledger entries? I dispute what should happen at the end. That question will depend on the operating agreement and authenticated balance. Ruth shifted beside him. Sandra's voice stayed neutral. I'm not deciding who sacrificed more. I'm preparing a settlement schedule. If the agreement requires company debts to be paid in a certain order, that's the order I'll use unless both members give a valid written instruction changing it. Craig folded his arms. So Christina can hand you a stack of papers and take money before I see anything? No. Both members receive the proposed settlement schedule. Supporting records are reviewed through closing. You'll have an opportunity to raise a factual objection. What counts as factual? Wrong amount, wrong party, missing signature, a repayment that isn't reflected, something I can verify. He looked toward Ruth. What if we don't agree it's fair? Sandra answered without changing her tone. Fairness isn't a settlement line. The room went quiet. I wrote that sentence in my notebook, not because it was memorable, but because it defined her role clearly. Sandra continued through the closing checklist. She needed the executed agreement from the safe, not just my copy. The bookkeeper had to send the ledger directly from the secure archive. Transfer confirmations could come from me, but she would compare names, dates, amounts, and destination information. Craig leaned toward the camera. Who pays for all this review? The LLC pays ordinary closing fees from sale proceeds, and if one member creates extra work, I bill the transaction for necessary work. If you both ask me to mediate a personal dispute, I'll decline. For the first time, Craig had no answer ready. Sandra ended the call by asking whether both members agreed to retain her for the closing. "I agree," I said. Craig took several seconds. "We need someone who can meet the deadline." "Is that a yes?" Sandra asked. "Yes." Ruth nodded, even though she wasn't an LLC member. Sandra sent the engagement letter that evening. Craig and I signed it. My new strategy had worked once. We had a closing attorney selected by both owners, a shared checklist, and a process that didn't depend on Craig agreeing with me at the last minute. That success gave him something specific to fight. The next bidder preview happened without me. I stayed at work and let Craig lead the property tour. Before it began, I sent Monica the completed disclosure packet, drainage receipts, insurance schedule, and utility records. Craig received the same files. At noon, Monica texted. Tour went smoothly. They appreciated having records in advance. Later, she called. The group registered for the auction. That's good, it is. Craig was comfortable handling the property questions alone. I'm glad, she paused. You sound like you mean that. I do. I wasn't sure. I'm not trying to make him fail, I know. Does he? That's not my question to answer. She was right. The practical division worked. Craig led what he knew. I made sure buyers received accurate documents. No one corrected anyone in front of the group. The bidder remained interested. The cost came the following day. Craig sent me a copy of Sandra's closing checklist with one line highlighted. Member debts and supporting records due 7 business days before auction. His message read, "Do not send anything until we settle this as a family." I replied, "The company selected Sandra to prepare closing. I'll meet her deadline." He called immediately. "You're not listening. I am. If you submit that loan, you turn this into a legal fight." "No. I turn it into a closing entry." "You know what I mean. I know you want the debt removed before anyone reviews it. I want us to reach an agreement. Your only proposed agreement is that I waive it. Because that's the fair result. Then put your reasoning in writing and send it to Sandra. I'm not arguing family business with a stranger. She's the closing attorney you agreed to. Because you boxed me in. I gave you 3 names. 2 couldn't do it. That's a deadline problem, not a trap." He lowered his voice. "Mom is sick over this. Ruth is worried. That isn't the same as me being wrong. You always say Ruth when you're angry. She is our mother. She is also the former bookkeeper who kept the agreement in the safe. Leave her out of it. She's already in it. You discussed the waiver with her before you told me about the sale." He went silent. I heard a vehicle pass behind him. "Don't send the records," he said. "I'm going to meet the closing deadline." He ended the call. That evening, Ruth came to my house without calling first. She stood on the porch holding a covered dish. I brought chicken. "You didn't drive this far to bring chicken." "I thought we could eat." I let her in. We sat at my kitchen table with plates between us. She moved food around without taking a bite. "Craig says you hired Sandra to enforce the loan. We both retained Sandra to close the sale. He didn't think she'd review it before the auction. The checklist says she will. He thought you'd work it out first." I already gave him my answer. Ruth looked around my kitchen. My counters were clean. My mail was stacked beside the refrigerator. The service records case sat locked against the dining room wall. "You have a good life here. I have a stable house. He's losing his. We're both selling the ranch. He lives there." "I know. He doesn't know where he'll go." "Has he looked?" "He says he can't until he knows what he'll receive." "That's true for me, too. You aren't trying to buy another home." "No. I'm trying to replace money I sent when the ranch needed it." She set down her fork. "He thinks you're punishing him." "For what?" "For being the one who stayed." "I don't want to punish him." "Then why does it have to be all of it?" "Because all of it is owed." She shook her head slowly. "You sound like Sandra. Sandra has seen a checklist. She hasn't seen the records. Craig thinks she already has. I haven't sent them." Ruth looked surprised. "Then there's still time." "For what?" "For you two to agree. We agree that the transfers occurred. We agree they're in the ledger. We agree the operating agreement addresses member loans. The only thing we don't agree on is whether I should surrender mine." She pushed her plate away. He gave up years. I'm not asking him to give them back. You're asking him to leave with less. I'm asking the LLC to pay its debt before we divide what remains. Ruth stood and carried her plate to the sink. He won't forgive you. The words landed because some part of me still wanted him to. I folded the foil over the remaining chicken. I'm not changing the settlement to purchase forgiveness. She turned toward me. When did you become so hard? When did you start calling a boundary hard? Her eyes filled. I regretted the sharpness, but I didn't take the sentence back. She collected her purse. At the door, she said, I wish you needed us. I held the door open. I did. She looked at me for a long moment, then walked to her car. The next morning, I received an email from Sandra. She had copied Craig. Please confirm when the original operating agreement and member debt support will be available for review. Before I could answer, Craig replied to everyone. The alleged member debt is disputed. Do not include it in any preliminary settlement schedule. He had finally put his objection in writing, not to the transfers, not to the ledger, to repayment. I attached his message to my closing folder and marked Sandra's deadline on my calendar. 2 hours later, Denise called from the bookkeeping office. Craig asked us not to release the ledger. On what basis? He says the member balance is disputed. Does he dispute the ledger entry? He didn't say. Did he ask you to change it? No. We wouldn't change an archived entry without proper support. I wrote down the time. What can you release to Sandra? If both members authorize it, we can send the complete ledger immediately. And if one refuses, we can respond to a valid company records request. Since there's a disagreement, I'd send it directly to Sandra rather than either member. How long would that take? 2 business days after we received the request. Sandra's deadline was 4 business days away. Preserve the current ledger exactly as it is. It's already preserved. Thank you. After the call, I emailed Sandra and told her Craig had instructed the bookkeeper not to release the records. She called me within 10 minutes. I can send a formal request, she said. Your copy of the agreement appears to give each member access to company records. Appears? I haven't reviewed the original. The original is in the ranch office safe. Can you get it? Yes. I believed that when I said it. I drove to the ranch after work. The gate key opened the padlock. Craig's truck was gone, but Ruth's car was outside the office. She was sitting behind the desk when I entered. I need the operating agreement. She didn't reach for the drawer. Craig came by this morning. I know he contacted the bookkeeper. He says you're going around him. I'm meeting the closing requirements. He wants the loan settled first. It is settled in the agreement, not between you. I placed my bag on the chair. Please open the safe. Ruth looked at the cabinet. I told him I wouldn't. You told him you wouldn't give me the agreement? I told him I wouldn't take sides. Keeping an LLC record from one member is taking a side. I'm protecting the only copy. From what? From both of you carrying it around. Sandra needs to review it. She can come here. Then let her review it here. Ruth shook her head. Not until you and Craig talk again. I stood very still. You're making access to a company document depend on me negotiating away a company debt. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. I said talk. We've talked. Then talk differently. How? Listen to what losing the ranch means to him. I have. No, you calculate, you prepare. Her voice had risen. Ruth almost never raised her voice. You make a list and decide what every word means. Your brother is frightened, and you answer him with sections. The section is the reason I sent the money. He called because he trusted you. I sent it because I trusted both of you, and now you're using it against him. I picked up my bag. I'll tell Sandra the original is being withheld. Ruth stood. Don't say it like that. What word would you use? I'm safeguarding it. From the closing attorney? From this fight. The document is part of the fight because Craig wants to ignore it. She walked around the desk. I won't open that safe while you're angry. I'm not angry. That's worse. I almost laughed, but her hands were shaking. I'm not going to take the agreement, I said. Sandra can review it here. You can watch her. No. Why? Because once an attorney comes into this office, Craig will think I helped you. I finally understood. She wasn't afraid the document would disappear. She was afraid Craig would blame her for letting it speak. "What do you think I'll believe about you?" I asked. Her eyes dropped. "You'll be fine." There it was again. I walked outside. Craig's truck came through the gate as I reached my car. He parked across the office drive close enough that I couldn't pull out without waiting for him to move. He got out holding a single sheet of paper. Did she open it? No. Good. He walked toward me and held out the page. The heading said, "Member Loan Waiver." It wasn't from Sandra. Craig had made it himself from an online form. It stated that I released the LLC from the full balance and agreed that sale proceeds would be divided equally after other debts and costs. There was a blank line for my signature. "You expected me to sign this beside my car? I expected you to read it." I read it. "Then you know what I'm offering. You're offering the same thing." "No, I'm offering to stop fighting. You block the ledger until we resolve the dispute. You don't dispute the ledger. I dispute you taking repayment. That isn't the same thing." "It is to me." I handed the paper back. "No." He didn't take it. "Keep it. I don't need it. Take it home. Sleep on it?" I've answered. He placed the sheet under my windshield wiper. "Mom won't release the agreement. I won't authorize the ledger. Sandra can't verify anything. You signed an engagement letter requiring both. I signed for a closing, not for you to clean me out. The loan won't take your share. It gets paid before we divide the remainder. You'll receive the repayment and then half of what's left." "Yes. And you think that's fair? I think it's what we agreed." He stepped closer. "I have spent years keeping your half from becoming worthless." "I know. You say that, then you take the first $186,000. The company repays it. Stop saying company. It's us." "No. That distinction matters. To people like you." "What does that mean?" "People who always have somewhere else to go." The office door opened behind him. Ruth stood on the step. Craig looked back at her, then returned his attention to me. "If you send a formal demand, everyone involved will know you're forcing this. Everyone involved already knows there's a disagreement. Monica doesn't." I said nothing. "The bidders don't," he continued. "The staff doesn't know the amount. Are you threatening to tell them?" "I'm telling you what happens when family business stops being private." Ruth came down the steps. "Craig, move your truck." He didn't. She touched his arm. "Let her leave." He moved it after several seconds. I pulled onto Red Fox Road with the waiver still under my windshield wiper. It lifted at the corners whenever I gained speed. At the first safe shoulder, I stopped and removed it. I didn't tear it up. I placed it in my folder. Not because it had authority. It didn't. It showed exactly what Craig wanted and exactly what he was willing to block to get it. The next morning, the ranch employee who had spoken to me during the first preview called my personal phone. I hope I'm not out of line. What happened? Craig held a staff meeting. I waited. He said the sale might get delayed because you and he disagree about money. Did he mention an amount? No. Did he tell you to contact me? No. He told us not to answer financial questions from buyers. That's appropriate. The employee hesitated. He also said some people who weren't here every day are trying to be paid before the people who were. I closed my office door. What did you say? Nothing. Why are you calling? Because some of us were here when those feed deliveries stopped. Then they started again. I always figured somebody found money. That was a useful truth from a witness who had no reason to flatter me. Did Craig ask staff to take a side? Not directly. Then don't. Keep doing your job. Direct buyer questions to Monica. Yes, ma'am, and don't discuss this call. I won't. When he hung up, I understood the loss. Craig had taken a company records dispute and turned it into a story about me taking money from working people. He hadn't used my name in the sentence. He didn't need to. At lunch, Ruth texted, "Please sign something that gives him a fair start." I replied, "I won't sign the waiver." She didn't answer. Sandra called that afternoon. If I don't receive the original agreement and ledger by the deadline, I can't place the loan on a verified preliminary schedule. What happens then? I can keep reviewing during the 10-day closing period, but that creates risk. A disputed seller distribution can delay disbursement even if the property transfer closes. Would the buyer be delayed? Not necessarily, but I won't release disputed proceeds until the seller side is supported. That mattered. Craig's counterstep could not erase the loan, but it could create the delay he would blame on me. What do you need from me now? Written instruction to request the ledger under your member access rights. I also need a plan for reviewing the original agreement. Can you inspect it at the ranch office? Yes, if it's made available. If Ruth refuses... Sandra wasn't offering rescue. She was telling me the price of moving forward. The bookkeeper would receive a formal request. Craig would accuse me of escalating. Ruth would have to choose whether to open the safe. If she didn't, closing could become slower and more expensive. I could stop all of it by signing the page in my folder. I took it out and read it once more. The waiver didn't mention Craig's labor. It didn't correct the brochure. It didn't protect Ruth. It only removed the debt. I set it aside and opened Sandra's instruction form. Before signing, I called Ruth. I'm authorizing the records request. She was silent. Sandra can inspect the agreement in the office. You can keep it in your hands the entire time. Craig will say I betrayed him. What will you say? That I kept the document safe. Then keep it safe while she reads it. Ruth's breathing changed. I can't promise. I know. Will you delay the request until tomorrow? No, we have a deadline. Christina, I'm not asking you to support me. I'm asking you to make a company record available for closing. And if I don't? Then Sandra notes that it was withheld, and the dispute continues into closing. Ruth whispered, "You do that to us. I'm choosing not to do it to myself." Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then I ended the call. I signed the instruction and sent it to Sandra. I copied Craig, Ruth, and the bookkeeper. The price was no longer hidden. Craig could damage my name at the ranch. Ruth could withdraw from me. Closing could become harder. I authorized the request anyway. Denise acknowledged the request the next morning. She copied both members and Sandra. The operating agreement permits either member to inspect company records. We will provide the archived ledger directly to closing counsel within 2 business days. Craig replied to everyone. I object to any distribution based on the alleged loan. Sandra answered with one question. Do you dispute a specific transfer, ledger entry, repayment status, or signature? He didn't respond. Later that afternoon, Ruth called. Sandra can come Friday morning. Thank you. I'll open the safe, but the agreement stays in the office. That's fine. Craig can't know I arranged this. He was copied on the request. That isn't the same as me choosing the time. I sat back in my chair. I won't lie if he asks. I'm not asking you to lie. You're asking me to keep your part quiet. I'm asking you not to make it worse. I'll tell him Sandra inspected the agreement if he asks me directly. Ruth was silent. All right, she said. Sandra arrived at the ranch office shortly before 8 on Friday. She carried a laptop, a portable scanner, and one slim file. Ruth was already there. The cabinet had been pulled away from the safe. The key rested in her palm. Sandra introduced herself and explained what she needed to do. I'll compare the original with the copy Christina provided. I'll scan the relevant pages and signature page. The original will stay here. Ruth looked at me. That's all? That's all I need from the safe today, Sandra said. Ruth unlocked it. She placed the brown folder on the desk and removed the agreement herself. Her hands were steady until she reached the signature page. Craig's signature appeared beneath mine. Ruth had notarized neither signature. She had simply watched us sign and filed the document after our attorney prepared it years earlier. Sandra checked the page numbers and binding. No missing pages, she said. She turned to section 7.4. The language was plain. Authenticated member loans had to be repaid from available company proceeds before any remaining amount could be distributed equally to the members. Sandra scanned the page. Ruth stood close enough to read over her shoulder. Does that decide it? She asked. It establishes the rule, Sandra said. I still have to verify whether the claimed balance qualifies under it. What if one member says it isn't fair? That doesn't change my review. Ruth looked toward the window. Sandra scanned the signature page, then returned the agreement to her. Please place it back where you normally keep it. Ruth did. She locked the safe and moved the cabinet into position. I have errands, she said. She picked up her purse but paused beside me. Will you call me when it's done? I'll call you later. That isn't what I asked. I don't know what Sandra can discuss while she's reviewing. Sandra closed the scanner case. I'll provide the settlement schedule to both members at the proper time. Ruth nodded. That answer allowed her to leave without choosing another question. After her car disappeared, I set my service records case on the desk. Sandra watched me unlock it. You keep these at home? In a locked case. Have the originals been altered, copied over, or reissued? No. I gave her the transfer confirmations in date order. She checked my name first. Then she checked the destination account, confirmation numbers, and amounts. Her laptop chimed. The ledger arrived. Denise had sent it through a secure link. Sandra downloaded the archive while I sat across from her. For the next hour, I did nothing except answer direct questions. Was this transfer initiated by you? Yes. Did anyone reimburse this amount outside the ledger? No. Did you sign a waiver at the time? No. Did you receive additional ownership in exchange? No. She asked the same questions in slightly different forms for each transfer. I didn't rush her. At one point, Craig's truck passed the office and continued toward the lower field. Sandra looked up. Does he know we're here? That wasn't my question. No? Ruth didn't tell him the appointment time. Would you prefer I notify him? I prefer you follow your normal process. I don't normally announce each review step. I do give both members the final schedule and supporting basis. Then do that. She returned to the ledger. The archived entries matched every confirmation. The total matched the balance carried forward into the current year. There was no repayment entry. Sandra leaned back. I've removed the uncertainty about authentication. I waited. The member loan is supported. Section 7.4 applies. The current balance is $186,000. Hearing it from her didn't feel like winning. It felt like a door closing behind me. What happens next? I prepare the settlement framework. The final figures depend on the winning bid, mortgage payoff, expenses, and closing adjustments. But the order is fixed. Yes, the authenticated member loan is paid before the remaining company proceeds are divided equally. Will the dispute delay the property transfer? Not if the sellers accept the bid and provide everything else on time. Craig can raise a factual objection when he receives the schedule. So far, he hasn't identified one. Does he receive this conclusion today? I don't issue a settlement schedule before there's a sale price. I'll record the verification in the closing file. After the auction, I'll insert the accepted bid and current costs, then circulate the schedule. That meant Craig knew I intended to use the loan. He knew Sandra was reviewing it. He did not know the review was complete. I didn't ask Sandra to hide anything from him. I also didn't volunteer her work before she normally issued it. She scanned the transfer confirmations and handed each original back to me. Keep these available through closing. I will. Do you want me to communicate through both members on everything? Yes. Even if that creates more argument? Yes. I don't want a private advantage. I want the agreement followed. Sandra closed her laptop. That's what the file supports. She left before noon. I locked the confirmations in my case and drove to Ruth's house. She opened the door but didn't invite me in. Was it verified? Yes. Her grip tightened around the doorknob. All of it? Yes. She looked past me toward the road. So there's no mistake. No. What will happen? The ranch debts and closing costs are paid. My member loan is repaid. Then Craig and I split the rest equally. She nodded as if repeating a set of directions. Does he know? He knows the review is happening. Sandra will give both of us the schedule after the auction. You could tell him now. I could. Will you? I'm not going to discuss Sandra's unfinished settlement schedule. He already knows the rule, the balance, and my answer. Ruth stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind her. He thinks he can still change your mind. I know. Then tell him he can't. I have. Tell him Sandra agreed with you. This isn't about Sandra agreeing with me. He won't understand that. He understands the agreement. Ruth rubbed both arms against the cool air. If this happens in front of people, he'll never forgive you. That depends on what he says in front of people. You know he's going to speak. Monica hasn't told me that. He asked her. That was useful information. What did he ask to do? Say a few words before you accept the bid. Thank the staff. Talk about the ranch. Did Monica agree? She said she'd keep it brief. Ruth looked at me. You could ask her to stop him? I could have. I could also have sent Monica the transfer confirmations that afternoon. I could have demanded a corrected brochure, emailed the bidder list, and attached Craig's waiver. The people who believed I had shown up to take money would have seen exactly where the money came from. It would have humiliated him before the auction and made every bidder wonder whether the sellers could close. That was the easier, cruel choice. I'm not going to interfere with his remarks, I said. Why not? He has a right to talk about his work. And if he talks about yours, then I'll answer. Ruth's face changed. Publicly? If he makes it necessary. She stepped back toward the door. You came here to warn me. I came because you asked me to call when the review was done. I didn't ask for this. You kept the agreement. I kept paper. I didn't choose what it would do. Neither did I. We chose when we signed it. She opened the door. I need time. I know. She went inside. Monica called that evening to review the auction schedule. Bidder registration would open at 9. The auction would begin at 11. After the highest bid, she and the auctioneer would bring the acceptance form to us. Craig asked to thank everyone before signatures, she said. I heard. Are you comfortable with that? He can speak for himself. Do you want equal time? I want to be standing there when the sellers accept the bid. You will be. Where will Sandra be? At the closing table near the front. She'll collect the signed acceptance and deposit paperwork. Good. Monica hesitated. Is there anything else I should know? No. She still understood our disagreement as family tension over language and roles. She didn't know Craig's public story was tied to a verified financial claim. I kept it that way. The forecast called for rain on auction day. Monica arranged extra chairs under the pavilion and moved registration tables away from the open sides. Craig spent the final week repairing fence, cleaning the office, and directing staff. I sent the last utility records to Sandra and approved the final property packet. We spoke only when necessary. The day before the auction, he met me at the gate. You can still sign the waiver tonight. No. Then don't act surprised when people see what you care about. I won't. He looked at the service records case on my back seat. You're bringing that tomorrow? Yes. His eyes stayed on it. You've decided to ruin this. I've decided to accept a valid bid and follow the agreement. He stepped away from the car. Same thing to you. I drove through the gate. That night, I placed the transfer confirmations in a leather folder. I added my copy of the operating agreement and Sandra's closing checklist. Using them would change my relationship with Craig. It might change my relationship with Ruth, too. I packed them anyway and set my alarm for before dawn. Rain began before sunrise. By 8, water ran along both sides of Red Fox Road. I drove through the gate and parked behind the office. The brass key turned without sticking. Craig was already at the pavilion. He wore a clean blue shirt under his work jacket. Staff members carried chairs away from the open sides while Monica covered the registration table with plastic. Sandra sat near the front with her laptop and closing files. I carried my service records case into the office and placed it under the desk. The leather folder stayed with me. Ruth arrived a few minutes later. She wore a dark green raincoat and shoes that weren't made for mud. You're early, she said. So are you. I didn't sleep. I looked toward the pavilion. Neither did I. She followed my eyes. Craig practiced his remarks last night. What did he say? He thanked the staff. Talked about your father. Anything else? He said the ranch survived because somebody stayed. I adjusted the folder under my arm. Did you correct him? He was practicing. That wasn't my question. She pulled her raincoat closed. No. Bidder registration opened at 9. Cars and trucks filled the upper field. Monica's assistant directed traffic away from the soft lower turn. People came through the pavilion holding umbrellas and auction packets. The group that had attended the second preview registered near the front. The woman who had thanked me for the drainage answer didn't return. I noticed her absence, then stopped looking for her. Craig moved easily through the crowd. He knew several local trainers and property owners. He shook hands, answered questions, and pointed buyers toward the barns. I stayed near the closing table. One bidder asked whether the office furniture was included. Another asked about the equipment list. I answered only what I knew and directed property questions to Craig. The division held. Shortly before 11, Monica handed both of us the acceptance form. "The auctioneer will announce the final bid," she said. "Craig will give brief remarks. Then you'll both sign if you accept." Craig looked at me. "Assuming it reaches the reserve." "Assuming that," Monica said. Sandra checked the blank settlement worksheet on her screen. She didn't speak to me about the loan. She didn't need to. The auctioneer stepped to the microphone. Rain struck the roof hard enough that he had to raise his voice. He explained the bidding rules, deposit, and closing deadline. He reminded everyone that the sale required seller acceptance. Then the bidding began. The first offers moved quickly. $900,000, $950,000, $1 million. The pavilion became quieter as the amount rose. Bidders lifted numbered cards without looking at one another. Monica stood near the auctioneer and watched the back rows. Craig stood on my right. Ruth was on my left. At $1,100,000, the pauses became longer. A bidder near the aisle added $20,000. Someone near the rear added $10,000. The auctioneer moved between them in smaller steps. Craig pressed his tongue against the inside of his cheek. His hands stayed in his jacket pockets. The bid reached $1,200,000. No one moved. The auctioneer waited. A card rose near the front. $1,220,000. He looked toward the rear. The other bidder shook his head. Monica leaned close to the auctioneer and said something I couldn't hear. He called for another bid. Nothing. Then a man standing near the pavilion post raised his card. $1,240,000. The bidder near the front lowered hers. The auctioneer asked once, then twice, then a third time. He struck the wooden block on the podium. $1,240,000, high bid, subject to seller acceptance. Applause moved through the pavilion. Craig closed his eyes for half a second. Ruth grabbed my hand. "That's enough," she whispered. It was above the reserve. It would cover the mortgage, auction costs, ordinary company debts, and the member loan. There would still be proceeds left to divide. Monica brought the acceptance form to us. "Craig, your remarks first. Keep it under 2 minutes." He took the microphone. The applause faded. He thanked the bidders for coming through the rain. He thanked the staff for keeping the ranch presentable. He mentioned our father and the first barn built on the ridge. Everything he said was true. Then he looked at the photograph in Monica's brochure. There were plenty of years when selling would have been easier, he said. But I kept showing up. I did the repairs. I made the calls. I found a way to keep the gates open. Several staff members nodded. I didn't have another career to go back to. This was my career. This was my home. Ruth's fingers tightened around mine. Craig looked toward me. Some people send money and call that sacrifice. I stayed. The pavilion went quiet. I could hear rain tapping the metal roof. Folding chairs scraped behind me as 2 bidders leaned forward. Monica stood beside the auctioneer with a fixed smile, still holding the brochure that showed Craig near the main barn. Ruth's hand moved from mine to my wrist. "Christina," she whispered, "please don't do this here." Craig waited for me to lower my eyes. I reached into my leather folder. Before we accept the bid, I said, "I need to correct something." Monica stepped toward me. "Do you want the microphone?" "Yes." Craig held it for 1 second longer than necessary. Then he gave it to me. I faced the bidders. My brother ran the daily operations of this ranch. He did the repairs, managed staff, and stayed through difficult years. Craig's posture changed slightly. He hadn't expected me to begin there. I continued. He also just suggested that money sent from somewhere else didn't keep these gates open. I removed the first transfer confirmation. This bears my name. I held it where the people nearest us could see. I removed the remaining confirmations and placed them on the table beside Monica. So do these. Craig stepped closer. What are you doing? Correcting the record. You're waiving bank papers at an auction. They're deployment transfer confirmations. A murmur moved through the chairs. I didn't mention where I had been or what those days had felt like. The paper didn't need a story. Craig reached toward the table but stopped before touching anything. She sent money 1 year. I worked here for years. Yes, I said. Both are true. He turned toward the crowd. The ranch belonged to both of us. Money she sent protected her own ownership. It was recorded as a member loan. That was bookkeeping. Ruth spoke beside me. No, Craig. He looked at her. She stared at the transfer confirmations. Her name is on them. His face hardened. You knew she was going to do this. I knew Sandra reviewed the agreement. The bidders could hear every word. Monica looked at me. What agreement? The LLC operating agreement. Craig took the microphone from my hand. This has nothing to do with the auction. Christina and I have a private disagreement over how to divide the money. I took the microphone back. It affects the settlement order. It does not affect whether I accept this bid. He looked at Sandra. You already discussed the money with her? Sandra stood but remained behind the closing table. Both members discussed the claimed loan during our joint call. Claimed, Craig said. Exactly. Sandra opened her file. The transfers were authenticated after that call. His face went still. When? Before today. You didn't tell me you were copied on the records request. You disputed repayment but did not identify an incorrect transfer, ledger entry, signature, or prior payment. Craig looked at me. You knew she'd already decided. She didn't decide the rule, I said. We signed it. He pointed toward the confirmations. Those papers don't mean she gets paid first, Sandra answered. The transfers match the LLC ledger. Section 7.4 requires authenticated member loans to be repaid before the remaining proceeds are distributed equally. Monica lowered the brochure. How much is the member loan? $186,000, I said. The number moved through the pavilion in low voices. Craig stared at Sandra. So she takes that, then gets half? The LLC repays its debt, Sandra said. After other required payments and costs, the remaining balance is divided equally between both members. That isn't equal. It is the settlement order in the agreement. He turned toward Ruth. Say something. Ruth's eyes were wet, but her voice was clear. You both signed it. Craig looked as though she had struck him. I kept the microphone low. Your labor deserves respect, I said. It does not give you ownership of my service pay. He stepped close enough that only the people nearest us could see his hands shaking. You planned this whole thing. I prepared the records you tried to block. You waited until people were watching. You chose to speak before we signed. Monica moved between us. We have a valid high bid waiting. Are both sellers accepting it? Craig looked across the pavilion. The winning bidder stood near the post with his card still in hand. Staff members watched from the rear. The printed brochure lay open beside my transfer confirmations. Craig could refuse the bid. He could force another auction date and another round of losses. He knew that would cost him too. He placed the microphone on the table. Give me the form. Monica handed it to him. He signed first. His pen pressed hard enough to leave a mark through the duplicate page. Then he pushed the form toward me. I read the bid amount, deposit, and 10 business day closing requirement. Nothing had changed except that everyone now knew whose money had kept the ranch from defaulting. I signed my name. Monica checked both signatures. The sellers accept the high bid of $1,240,000. The auctioneer repeated the acceptance into the microphone. Applause started again, but it sounded different. Craig walked away from the table. A A staff member stepped aside to let him pass. Craig didn't look at anyone. Monica picked up one of the transfer confirmations. You asked me to change the wording. I asked Craig first. He told me your contribution wasn't part of the ranch story. I know. She looked toward him, then at the brochure in her hand. I didn't know this was formally disputed. You do now. Sandra came around the table with the signed acceptance. I'll insert the bid into the settlement schedule today. Both members will receive it. Will closing stay on time? I asked. Yes, if everyone meets the remaining requirements. The winning bidder approached us. He shook Monica's hand, then mine. Are we going to have a problem getting clear title? No, I said. The seller distribution is separate from your purchase. Sandra nodded. The accepted sale can proceed. That was all he needed. He returned to the registration table to arrange the deposit. Ruth stood beside the empty chair where she'd been sitting. You didn't stop the sale, she said. No, you could have. So could Craig. She looked toward the rain. I thought you wanted everyone to see him lose. I wanted him to stop using my silence as proof. Craig came back under the pavilion. Water darkened the shoulders of his jacket. He stopped across from me. You got what you wanted. I accepted the bid. You made sure they all knew. You made the claim in front of them. He looked at the transfer confirmations. I hoped the money was worth it. I placed the papers back into my folder. This wasn't the moment that gave the money value. He didn't answer. Sandra handed each of us a copy of the signed acceptance. Closing is due within 10 business days. I'll circulate the preliminary settlement schedule by tomorrow morning. Craig took his copy without looking at her. The false version had lasted until the exact moment he committed to it in public. Then the same records he tried to keep inside the family became part of the accepted sale. Sandra carried the original acceptance to the closing table and started the 10 business day clock. Sandra sent the preliminary schedule at 8:12 the next morning. The accepted bid appeared at the top. Beneath it were the mortgage payoff, auction expenses, closing costs, and ordinary company bills. My member loan had its own line before the remaining balance was divided. Craig replied within 6 minutes. I do not approve repayment of the disputed amount. Sandra answered both of us. The amount has been authenticated under the operating agreement. Please identify any factual error by noon tomorrow. He didn't identify one. Instead, he called Ruth. I knew because she called me immediately afterward. He wants me to ask you again. What did you say? I said I already had. And? He asked whether I cared what happened to him. I stood beside my bedroom window. The service records case was open on the bed. What did you say? That I care what happens to both of you. That isn't an answer. I know. She sounded tired. I told him I wouldn't ask you to waive it again. That was the first action she took that cost her something with Craig. Thank you. He hung up on me. I'm sorry. So am I. We ended the call without fixing anything. At the ranch, auction signs still stood near the gate. The pavilion floor was marked with muddy shoe prints. Empty water bottles filled 2 recycling bags. Craig was loading folding chairs into the equipment shed when I arrived. I took the other end of a table. I can do it, he said. So can I. He released his side. The table dropped several inches and struck my thigh before I caught it. I lowered it to the floor. Was that necessary? I said I could do it. You let go without warning. You're good at preparing for things. A bruise was already forming beneath my work pants. I moved the table alone. He followed me into the shed. You got your schedule. We both did. You know what I mean, yes. He stood between me and the door. $186,000 before the split. That's the balance. You could still tell Sandra to remove it. No. The auction is over. You made your point. The loan was never a point. It's money. Yes. He laughed without humor. At least you admit it. I've never denied it. You value money over family. I placed the table against the wall. Your labor deserves respect. It does not give you ownership of my service pay or permission to erase my contribution. I didn't erase anything. You checked no. We're back to the form again? We never left it. The brochure and the waiver came from the same belief. You thought your work counted only if mine didn't. He looked toward the open shed door. People came up to me after you left. What did they say? Does it matter if you're bringing it up? They looked at me like I stole from you. Did anyone say that? No. Then you're describing how you felt. His jaw tightened. You enjoyed watching the room turn. I watched people understand that the brochure was incomplete. You humiliated me. You took the microphone. He stepped closer. You waited. I gave you every private opportunity to correct it. He didn't answer. Outside, a staff member carried a stack of auction signs toward us. Craig moved aside and let me pass. The employee stopped near the shed. Where do these go? Ask Craig, I said. He's managing the property through closing. Craig looked at me. I could have taken over. The staff had seen the transfer papers. They were careful around me now, almost formal. Using that moment to replace him would have been easy. It would also have been wrong. He knew how to close the ranch properly. I wasn't going to turn recognition into authority I hadn't earned there. Craig pointed toward the office. Put them against the back wall. The employee carried them away. For the next several days, we worked through Sandra's checklist. The buyer completed inspections. The mortgage lender sent its payoff. Denise updated the ledger for final vendor bills. Monica confirmed the deposit had cleared. No new problem appeared. Craig submitted 2 questions about auction expenses. Sandra answered them. He asked whether his delayed management pay could be added. Denise reviewed the company records and found that all approved management pay had either been issued or recorded in current expenses. There was no additional company balance. Sandra copied both of us on the answer. Craig didn't raise it again. On the 5th business day, Monica called me. I've removed the family description from the digital closing packet. Thank you. I should have required both owners to approve it. You had my written objection. I know. Her voice became quieter. I treated it like family sensitivity instead of a factual warning. Yes. I'm sorry. I appreciate that. Do you want me to send a correction to everyone who received the brochure? That would have cleared my name before closing. It also would have made Monica responsible for correcting Craig. No, I said. Not from you. Why? Because you can correct your process. Craig has to correct his statement. Do you think he will? I don't know. Monica accepted the answer. Our relationship remained professional. She didn't become my friend. I didn't need her to. She completed the auction work and stopped treating Craig as the only seller. On the 7th business day, Sandra sent the final settlement schedule. The member loan remained exactly where it had been in the preliminary version. After that repayment, the remaining LLC proceeds were divided equally between Craig and me. He called Sandra directly. She added me to the conversation. I want it on record that I object, he said. It is on record, Sandra replied. Then why doesn't the schedule change? Because you haven't identified a factual or contractual basis for changing it. I put more into that ranch than any ledger can show. I'm not ruling on that statement. You're paying her first. I'm paying an authenticated company debt in the order both members agreed to. Craig breathed into the phone. What happens if I don't sign? The buyer can enforce the accepted sale documents. Your distribution would remain held until the seller requirements are complete. He had no practical advantage left. Refusing would delay his money, increase costs, and threaten an agreement he had signed in public. I'll sign, he said. Closing took place on the 9th business day. We met at Sandra's office in Tryon. Rain had cleared, but the pavement was still dark in shaded places. The buyer signed first in another conference room. Sandra kept the sides separate until the documents were ready. Craig sat at one end of the table. I sat at the other. Ruth wasn't there. Sandra reviewed the sale documents in plain language. Craig asked no questions. When she reached the settlement schedule, she turned a copy toward each of us. The mortgage and company costs are paid first. The authenticated member loan is repaid to Christina. The remaining balance is divided equally between the 2 members. Craig stared at the page. You've said it enough. Sandra looked at him. I'm required to confirm what you're signing. He picked up the pen. Then confirm it. I just did. He signed. I signed after him. The property transfer closed within the agreed deadline. No judge entered the room. No officer ordered Craig to behave. Sandra didn't punish him. She followed the agreement we had both signed, using records I had preserved and chosen to submit. The money reached my account that afternoon. I was sitting in my car outside a grocery store when the notification appeared. The deposit matched the member loan repayment on the schedule. A separate deposit reflected my equal share of the remaining proceeds. Craig received his equal share of that remainder. He received less than he had expected when he first called Monica. He still received a substantial distribution from the sale. I locked my phone and went inside to buy milk, coffee, and detergent. The ordinary errand helped. The repayment didn't feel like a prize. It felt like something heavy being returned after I had stopped expecting anyone to carry it back. Craig didn't call. Ruth did. Did it close? Yes. Did you receive the loan? Yes. And Craig received his share? Yes. She was quiet. Can I come over? Not tonight? Tomorrow? I'll meet you at the ranch office. The office still had to be emptied. Company records had to be boxed. Personal items had to be separated before the new owner took possession. Ruth arrived before me the next morning. The safe stood open. She had removed the old tax folders and placed them in labeled boxes. The operating agreement lay on the desk. I spent years thinking your silence meant you agreed, she said. I took off my coat. She continued before I could answer. I confused silence with consent. I did it because asking you was harder than assuming. Her apology was clear. It was also late. I hear you, I said. I should have called before Craig contacted Monica. Yes. I should have corrected him. Yes. She looked at the open safe. I'm sorry. I didn't hug her. I'm not ready to tell you it's fine. I know. Don't ask me to give him money. Don't carry messages between us. If he wants a relationship, he can speak to me himself. Ruth nodded. I can do that. We'll see. She accepted the answer without crying or asking me to soften it. Then she picked up a box of company records and carried it toward my car. I took the other side. We moved it together, one careful step at a time. Ruth stopped at the car and waited for me to choose where the box went. Back seat, I said. She opened the door and guided it in without rearranging anything else. That was a small change. Before, she would have decided what was best, then told me she was helping. We spent the morning separating company records from family papers. Ruth read every label aloud before sealing a box. Old insurance policies, company archive, your father's livestock notebooks, family, who takes those? She didn't say Craig should have them. She asked, let's scan them first, then he can keep the originals if he wants. Ruth wrote that on a yellow note. Around noon, she ordered sandwiches. She didn't mention Craig. She didn't ask whether I planned to call him. The silence felt different when it wasn't being used to push me. Craig stayed away for 11 days. During that time, Monica closed the auction file. She sent the final property materials to the new owner and removed Craig's personal description from the public listing. The original brochures still existed. People had taken them home. That couldn't be undone. Then Monica forwarded an email to me. Craig had written it himself. Please send this correction to the auction bidder list. Christina Wagner provided the documented financing that prevented the ranch debt from defaulting. My earlier description did not acknowledge her contribution. There was no apology attached. He didn't say he had been confused. He didn't blame the brochure wording on Monica. He corrected the fact Monica sent it to the same list that had received the preliminary profile. She copied both of us. I replied, received. Craig didn't answer. 3 days later, he called a final staff meeting at the ranch. The remaining employees were helping prepare the property for turnover. I was there to collect company records from the office. He asked me to stay for the meeting. We stood inside the main barn. Dust moved through the light near the doors. Craig kept both hands in his jacket pockets. He thanked everyone for finishing the sale work. He explained when final pay and tax documents would arrive. Then he looked toward me. I said some things before the auction that weren't complete. No one moved. The money that got the ranch through the default came from Christina. It was recorded as a loan and the company repaid it at closing. That was all he said about it. One employee nodded. Another looked at the floor. The man who had called me after Craig's earlier staff meeting met my eyes for a moment. Craig continued with instructions about equipment pickup. He didn't turn the correction into a speech about himself. That mattered. After the meeting, he found me in the office. I sent Monica the correction. I saw it, and I told the staff. I heard you. He leaned against the doorway. What else do you want? Nothing. His face tightened. You expect me to believe that? I wanted the record corrected. You corrected it. So we're fine? No. He looked toward the open safe. At least you're honest. I'm willing to talk. I'm not willing to pretend the last few months didn't happen. I lost my home. So did I. You didn't live here. I belonged here. He looked around the office. The desk drawers were empty. Pale rectangles showed where pictures had hung on the walls. I don't know how to do this, he said. Do what? Talk to you without getting angry. Then leave before you get angry. He gave me a sharp look. I waited. After a few seconds, he nodded. All right. He left. That was the first test. He returned, corrected the facts, and walked away without asking me to return any money. The second test came 2 weeks later. I was home on a Sunday afternoon when his truck stopped outside my house. He carried one of the family record boxes to the porch. Mom found this in her garage. What is it? Old ranch photographs. I opened the door wider. He stepped inside and placed the box beside the dining table. The service records case was against the wall, still locked. His eyes moved toward it, then away. Coffee? I asked. Sure. I poured 2 cups. He sat at the table where I had matched the transfer confirmations with the ledger. For several minutes, we discussed the photographs. Most showed fences, barns, horses, and relatives standing in clothes they probably thought looked good at the time. Craig found one of us beside the ranch gate. We were both adults in the picture. He held a post level while I poured dry concrete around it. I forgot you helped with that gate, he said. I was home between assignments. How long? 4 days. He looked at the photograph again. I replaced that post twice. I believe you. He put it back in the box. I found a place outside Columbus. To live? Small rental? Month to month? That sounds practical. It doesn't have room for much. You never liked having much inside. No. The ranch kept most of my junk outside. We drank coffee. He didn't mention the repayment. He didn't ask whether I would help with rent. He didn't say his share was smaller because of me. When he stood to leave, he pointed at the box. Mom wants us to divide those. We can scan them first. That's what she said. I almost smiled. She asked me before deciding, I said. He understood what that meant. She's trying. So are you. Don't make too much of it. I won't. He left his coffee cup in the sink. I noticed because he had always left cups wherever he finished them. That didn't make us close again. It gave us one afternoon without a demand. Ruth tested the new pattern in quieter ways. She called me directly when she wanted to see me. If Craig told her something about his life, she didn't use it to make me call him. If I asked how he was doing, she answered what she knew and stopped there. Once she started to say, "You should help him with," then caught herself. "He should ask you himself," she finished. "Yes, I'm learning. I see that." I began having lunch with her every other Saturday. Some meals were comfortable, others weren't. She still defended Craig when she thought I was too hard. I still went quiet when I didn't trust myself to answer. The difference was that she asked what the silence meant. The repayment stayed in my account while I decided what to do with it. I restored the retirement contributions I had reduced years earlier. I scheduled the roof work I had delayed. The rest remained in savings. I didn't give Craig part of it. He never asked again. My army work continued. On Monday mornings, I was still reviewing schedules, checking source entries, and asking why numbers didn't match. No one promoted me because of what happened at the ranch. No senior officer appeared to settle my family dispute. The only recognition that mattered there came from people correcting what they had said and changing what they did next. Craig and I met for coffee several more times. At the first meeting, he apologized for the brochure. I made it sound like you left because that made my staying look bigger. Yes. I was angry before the sale even started. I know. I thought if the ranch repaid you, it meant my work had no value. That was never true. He turned his cup slowly. I know that now. I didn't tell him I forgave him. He hadn't asked clearly, and I wasn't ready. At another meeting, he brought a list of ranch photographs he wanted. He asked instead of taking the whole box. We split the scanning cost evenly. That was the relationship I accepted. Limited, careful, based on actions I could see. The financial boundary stayed exactly where closing had placed it. A month after the sale, the new owner gave us a final afternoon to clear the office. Ruth took the family notebooks. Craig carried out the last toolbox. I checked every drawer and cabinet against our list. The safe was empty. Craig stood in the doorway holding his gate key. The new owner wants keys on the hook, he said. I know. He hung his copy there. Ruth added the office key. Then they walked outside together. I stayed behind with my service records case. If this story moved you, subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. The office sounded larger without the copier, file boxes, and old metal desk. Rain had started again, light enough that I could hear individual drops against the window. I checked the safe once more. Nothing remained inside. My copied operating agreement was in the final company archive. The original had gone with the closed LLC records. The transfer confirmations were locked inside my service records case. I turned off the office light. Through the open door, I could see Ruth waiting beside her car. Craig stood near the gate, giving the new owner directions about the lower turn. He pointed toward the ditch Christina and he had lined with stone, then stepped back and let the man inspect it. The hook beside the door held 2 keys. I opened my service records case and removed the first brass key, the one Craig had dropped into my palm months earlier. Its edges were worn from years at the ranch. The new owner nodded when I held it up. That's the last one, I said. I hung the brass gate key on the new owner's hook and left the empty ranch office with my service records case under my arm.